I can just do this at any point, yeah? Yeah, just asking.
Yes.
Right, this is gonna be another episode of Summoning Insight, which actually, apparently what I said last week was incorrect because yesterday I was doing a thing without too much breaking of the fourth wall, basically to do my show, Best Damn League Show, which you might be able to infer who the co-host might be for this episode. I had to wait until a show called Power Spike was finished. So I tuned in, going, oh great, can't wait to hear what Yamato, Dom, and Dagon think about the week's things. Tune in and fucking old Monty's still there. What's going on? What's going on? I'm
So,
lost.
Dom and Yamato are going to be doing something new soon. So Yamato hasn't gone
All
anywhere,
right.
guys.
Okay.
So
Okay.
just wait for a second. We're figuring out what we're doing with Power Spike at the moment. I love being on Power Spike. That's not the issue, guys. We're just trying to figure out ways how I can have a bit more time to work on the business side of things with LFN as that picks up. So obviously you guys are probably seen that we have a lot of sponsors at this point in time. Well, you know what? I think we can do even better. And also just managing all of that is taking up more and more of my time, which does make it occasionally kind of difficult to do all of, 6 weekly podcasts and focus on the content. So that's what's going on there. We will figure it out. I'm sure Yamato will be back on from time to time. Maybe I'll be back on full time. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds? Who knows what the future holds?
All I heard there was just a bunch of waffle. All I'm saying is, if you're in it for the love of the game, you just do what you have to do, don't you? So what can I tell you? Listen, Monty, I am someone who very much I exist in that sort of shadow realm with Dom, where we're just people who should thank Mark Merrill for making a free game that we're allowed to make a living off. So you have to understand, Monty, I'm not going to squander that opportunity, that absolutely
Okay.
free, unpaid opportunity to create thousands of hours of content for Mark Merrill's free video game. Who would I be if I squandered that opportunity? That grace from the Lord himself. I still can't handle how terrible that line is. Like, for real, guys, I don't think you realize that's like one of the worst examples I've ever seen of someone in a position of authority or celebrity just like throwing it back into the face of someone who even inferred within the premise of what Mark Merrill said, if you don't read it as Mark Merrill, is you're saying it to someone who's just created thousands of free hours of shit around your content, which almost certainly, by the way, if you think about it, like betting companies work, Monty, where they can track the turnover from your affiliate link. If there was a concept like that, like everyone who watched our content, they decided to watch League a bit more or play League a bit more or buy a skin or stay engaged, and otherwise maybe they'd have drifted away if there wasn't esports or esports content. If you could do that, the reason it's so obnoxious, Monty, is people like Dom would have made Riot literally millions of dollars. Like, if you think about how many people would have stayed in the game, like I'll guarantee you there's people who only watch like LEC because Dom has that stream or only got into LPL because he watched. Of course there is. And also, that fact is, I've had it in my whole career as well, mate, which is every now and then when you start to feel like your interest in the game itself wanes, what happens is you watch like a super dope match and someone just does something on a champion you like, and part of you thinks like, well, maybe I will boot the game up, and then you end up just playing it again, or a friend of yours comes back, hey, what's going on with League? Oh, why was Chovy still around or whatever? Like, I actually do think the esports side is like, like indirectly has fueled the game the whole time. So that was the maddest one ever, just where he sort of like threw it in Dom's face, like, bro, in that scenario, why are you saying the quiet part out loud? Yes, he's literally working for free, almost as like an unpaid marketing affiliate for your fucking game, you idiot. Like, why would you ever call that out? Like, I almost mock it as well. Like, what a mad cunt this guy is. So, especially because think about this, Dom, Monty. Actually, people like Dom are actually very loyal considering how they're treated by Riot.
Yeah.
Think about some of the massive streamers, Monty, who when they get huge, they instantly become a mercenary for hire, and all of a sudden any other game dev who isn't the main game dev can just hire them for literal like pennies, and they'll just be dancing in that guy's game like, hey, check out this new game, guys, download it today. Like, people like Dom just stay in the cot of League of Legends. They don't even fucking leave. It's not even like he's trying to promote a rival. He just actually loves your game, you idiot. Why would you ever disrespect?
Well, also, I think Dom was probably the biggest single driving factor into English-speaking fan base into LPL. Like his, 4 or 5 years of streaming it at this point in time. Like I don't think that people like LPL anywhere near as much if it wasn't his enthusiasm, right? Him like being the cheerleader for the region. It's made a big difference. And sure, we have other co-streamers these days who do LPL. Casual covers a lot of LPL as well. But I don't think any of these people would have been there if it wasn't for Dom.
Also, I didn't know this because I hadn't had a chance to talk to him for a little while. Dude, I thought when he kept saying he's going to quit LEC, it was just an indictment of like the level of play. They don't give him core streaming rights.
Of course not.
Oh, these people are so fucking stupid. The worst thing about Riot, Monty, is this. In time, I eventually did figure out like my own sort of like, I don't know, fucking praxis of how they operate. But the worst thing about them is, I always used to say about dickheads like ESL in other parts of esports, the thing I actually like about them is they're so like transparently driven by their own profit margin that like normally they're very easy to predict in a good way. Like essentially, as long as it helps them, they're probably going to allow you to make your money too. The worst thing about Riot is their permanent MO is I will always cut off my nose to spite my face. Like they're so whack, dude. Like if there's anyone who's absolutely earned, like both by like metrics, but also the amount of hours, surely Dom's at top of the fucking list, mate. Come on. That's gross. So he has to, again, you have to just cock him and he has to like live stream. So then he just doesn't live view rather. So you just want to do it now. Brilliant. Great way to just kill your own game, you morons. By the way, if you had to say, Monty, the #1 draw for people who aren't just plebs right now to watch LEC, is that fucking sack stream with all those people in. He's even made a whole crew of people like a fucking Seinfeld-esque cavalcade of friends with different personas and balance. Or again, for free for your product. You don't even have to pay him 1 cent to do it. He gets his own. He even figured out all the finances, and then you're just like, I mean, even though there's absolutely zero upside to me turning this down, I'm going to decline your request, Dom. So your request has been declined. And then even worse, you know the worst thing about the Riot, Monty, is they will always fucking wreck you extra hard, where they won't just be like, yeah, okay, we just chose to turn you down. They'll always pretend it's like, you know, there's only 3 tickets at a station and you were just last in the line. Like, sorry, sir, we just didn't, you know, we had a lot of requests during this busy season and we just granted it to these other people. And they always act like you're just some uniform pleb. And like, even though we all know half the core streaming rights must just be given out to like a guy doing it in Swedish and a guy, you know what I mean? Like,
of course,
come on, man. What is this bullshit? Like, you know which way your bread's buttered. Like, that's one of the top people you've intentionally turned down, for fuck's sake.
It's even worse because, you know, part of the teams signing streamers. So, for example, when you sign a streaming partner, you want to put your logos of your sponsors, your team onto that co-stream. And so Cadril, who has a deal with Fnatic, has all of Fnatic's stuff and he gets paid by Fnatic. But Riot actively denies all the other teams the opportunity to sign somebody like Dom or another co-streamer to represent them. So like, I don't even know why the teams are agreeing to this structure, frankly, because it just is a hugely unfair advantage to teams like Mad Lions.
They should group up and push back, right? This is obviously, it would be in their own benefit to do it.
How it used to work on LCK is each of the teams had a certain number of co-streaming slots that they could allocate as they saw fit. So if you wanted to draw in co-streamers or influencers, you would have that opportunity to make a deal with them, and then you could actually have that exposure. But as it stands right now, some teams just get disproportionate exposure and they don't allow other teams to even try to get that same level of exposure. So, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous in my opinion, and just blatantly unfair to a bunch of the LEC teams because they decide who the co-streamers are and there's only a finite pool of them and you can't actually have one if you're one of the other teams. So, pretty weak. I do want to talk about some other Riot stuff though, because last week we talked extensively about MSI being in Riyadh next year, and one of
let's do it. I'll pull up the tweet, shall I? Because we need to read this one like exactly as it was said, right?
From Chris Greeley, the global head of strategy for LoL Esports, former head of NE Esports, former LCS commissioner. By the way, a guy who presided over North American Esports and LCS when it was in a massive decline. So take from that what you will. Said, MSI's move to July was in the works before we were aware of the Esports World Cup. While the timing is certainly coincidental, I can say with certainty that MSI is not taking place anywhere in the Middle East and isn't on the roadmap at this point for future years. So take from that what you will, guys. Let's just say I've heard things differently. And here's one of the things that I would just love to be wrong about, because I don't want MSI to happen in Riyadh. I don't want that to happen. I don't want a rebranded, not called MSI, same format or very similar format, multi-week international tournament to be held in Riyadh. I don't want anything to be held in Riyadh. So I would love to just take a big fat L on this one. I would really, really enjoy that. But this wording of this is like oddly specific. And so knowing how Riot does PR, it makes me a little bit nervous, Thorin. It makes me a little bit nervous because it says that MSI 2025, very specifically, just that year, is not taking place anywhere in the Middle East. But it doesn't say anything else about other tournaments. This is pure speculation. We've talked about LEC finals because technically Middle East is now part of the EMEA region. So it's possible that we could have, an LEC final end up there. Especially, it would be super disappointing for LEC because it seems like we're moving down to kind of one regional finals. And also, Thorin, I just find it very suspicious and also hilarious that he addresses this one point from a personal account, because Riot's very deliberate in how they handle this PR. He didn't write this statement, by the way. This was 100% written by a PR team, and yet it's not put out on official channels. And also, he doesn't discuss any of the other things we talked about in that last episode, including their obvious offering of production support to the Esports World Cup, which they just straight up lied about, talent blacklisting, all of the other shenanigans. Just this one point. And also, just about 2025, too, isn't on the roadmap at this point for future years. What the fuck does that even mean? What is the roadmap? How far does the roadmap bleed? Does that just mean 2026? It's like in conversation. Like, obviously, guys, use your brain. They are having this conversation with ESL. It's so obvious.
I mean, what's mad is if you actually read down and I couple it with the replies, I've got a little breakdown for you here. So first of all, in the actual statement itself, think about this, right? At the start, he says MSI's move to July was in the works before we were aware of the Esports World Cup, right? Now, here's the reason why that already immediate alarm bells. Because if the story goes, Monty, that either early this year or sometime, I think Richard even said it was last year even maybe. I think, wasn't it supposed to be like last year during Gamers at Summit? It was implied that the Riot people were already going over there. So the idea they didn't know this was happening just doesn't make sense because it almost implies they only found out.
It's always technicalities. It was probably called Gamers 8 and they didn't know about the Esports World Cup, even though it's functionally the same event.
But what they're doing there is just playing a stupid semantic game. Like, you did know in spirit what the event was, that it was there. It already happened last year as a different event. And then now, but you're going, essentially what they're doing is acting like, no, but I didn't know that new like fucking improved Colgate 2.0 though with the white cleansing would be there. And you just said toothpaste last time. You know what I mean? Like, you're just playing a stupid game like that. So there's that already. Then this line already is mental when it goes, well, the timing is certainly coincidental, right? What would be coincidental about you going to Saudi Arabia, meeting with the people involved in running this event, them announcing an event around a similar time you're doing an event, and then that somehow later after those facts is coincidental? No. At best, what you mean is like essentially like it's coincidence in the sense that it has nothing to do with us. But let's be real, you're also making that sound, Monty, with how it's coupled with the first sentence. Like, again, you didn't know anything about this. The reason it's coincidental is you just lived in a hermetically sealed box where you were like, oh, we're gonna have MSI in Worlds, and they're like, Esports World, what? Nani?
And by the way, there's no way ESL wasn't talking to them about this. ESL, the higher up people at ESL obviously know all the higher up people in esports at Riot. I mean, duh, it's not that hard.
I think people are also forgetting
or an email.
The literal top EWC people were the ESL people who used to do the IM events for Riot. Like, essentially, these were the main people that were allowed to white label events for Riot to some degree, / run their own events, / partner with them and use their LEC and LCS teams. So, let's not again pretend like, Ralph, who? I don't know about that. I am just a guy at Riot Global. So then it goes here. Think of the wording. It goes, I can say with certainty that MSI is not taking place anywhere in the Middle East. Right? Okay. That's it. So again, if MSI
2025, very specific
and it's the problem. This is where Riot, by trying to tell the truth, have already fucked up, because immediately James Fudge, who's one of the best journalists right now, if people don't know, goes, you're not rebranding it, right? Right? You know what the simple answer to that is, Monty? That kills the whole thing. No. He doesn't say no, though. Are you ready? It sounds like he does. You ready? James Fudge goes, you're not rebranding it, right? Because obviously that would be the semantic get out. He goes, no plans to right now. So if you understand, guys, within his sentence, that means he's totally fine to literally do what we just said. James Fudge is essentially saying, you're not just playing a word game here. And he goes, Maybe I am. Maybe I aren't. That's essentially what he just answered. That's actually for like one sentence in, we've already given the whole game up. Then there's another one, Monty. If you scroll down, it says down here, it goes, where was the other one? Wait there a second. There was one more as well. I just need to find it a sec.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying.
Here's the other one. The other one goes, the most important point from the rumor: will both MSI and the new international tournament still be managed by Riot, listen, or gonna be managed by a third party? So what this guy's asking is, since we're addressing MSI here, and you're saying there's a third international tournament coming, well, will any of these be operated by someone who isn't Riot? By the way, if they are, this entire thread is a waste of everyone's time, because the entire premise of the rumor was Riot's going to let other people operate these tournaments, which means it'll probably be the Saudis, right? So the whole premise of the initial post by Chris Greeley was to defend against the notion that is ever happening. So you ready? It's going to be simple, Monty. All he's going to do, in light of what he tried to convey with that first message, that it's not happening in the Middle East to MSI and that they have no plans to in the roadmap for the future. All we need is him to say no. If he says no again, he's killed it. So you ready? Will they operate both? Ready for the word again? See if you can guess which words do all the heavy lifting. We're still planning to operate them. So essentially, it could even be yes again. Literally, this guy's just asked, well, what about MSI and this new international tournament? Like, you would run them though, right? Well, we're planning to. So already they could be the international tournament too, even though they're saying it can't be. This is so bad.
Thorin, I will also point out that this could also be a way of negotiating with ESL, which is like, basically, if they're trying to maximize the amount of money that they could get out of ESL, they could literally just say, oh, these rumors aren't true. We're still planning to operate them. It sure would cost a lot of money for us to not operate these, right? And so I can't help but think that there's a possibility that this is some sort of signaling as part of a larger deal. You know what I mean? And also, there's many semantic ways. You pointed out how you could change the name of the tournaments. You could delete MSI entirely and just run Esports World Cup with the MSI format. The other concern that I have, Thorin, is that somehow, and this may seem crazy, but I think might be possible, is if Riot's esports and ESL become the same company. And by what I mean by that is, what happens if Riot spins off its esports division and then as its own company and then sells it to ESL, and then Riot and the new ESL Riot esports entity sign some sort of indefinite exclusive license deal to create Riot esports events? That might be a thing that happens. Like, I don't think it's crazy to put that on the table. In which case, you know, you could say, are you planning to license this to a third party? Because, like, technically the answer is no, because you would be part of the new company. It would be first party. Like, there's a lot of weirdness that could happen here. And there are too many. I've heard a lot of other unconfirmed rumors, but there's too much smoke around this entire like Riot Saudi relationship for it just to be about events, in my opinion. There's too many people like going to Saudi Arabia. There's too many conversations that appear to be happening at a very high level within the company. And I am beginning to grow concerned that there is some deeper aspect of this that isn't just like Riot letting ESL do events. Now, obviously, that information isn't going to leak because it's going to be contained within the upper management of these companies. But I'm just going to say it's real suspicious right now that there are some shenanigans afoot.
Right, here's the problem. Like I said, if you are someone who very quickly skim reads the Chris Greeley tweet, or who just doesn't understand how to read between the lines, you will think he said what I'm about to say. But actually, if you understand that breakdown I just did there, you'll understand that the distinction is everything. Here's all he had to say, Monty. It's actually really easy. Since his job is, he is the global head of strategy for LOL Esports, he would know. He knows what's going on. Like, he's not some random guy at a low level who's just guessing. So here's all he would need to say, Monty. He would just need to make the following factual statements. You just say, MSI will not be operated by the Saudis or in Middle East. for the next 2 years, let's say, since he's implying there's a roadmap, 2 or 3 years, just say that as a fact. Then you could say the third international tournament also will not be operated by the Saudis or in the Middle East for the next 2 to 3 years. The Saudis themselves won't operate any of our events for the next 2 to 3 years. And ESWC will not, in any spiritual or name otherwise context, become MSI or another event operated by the Saudis. If you make those 4 statements, right, there's no confusion at all. And are you ready? We're categorically wrong. We're wrong in every aspect of our speculation. And we're owned. Dude, we're owned. Because actually the game he's playing, as he even said in those replies, that they don't address, rumors on official accounts. That's why he's doing it on a 5,000 follower account. That's only going to blow up within hardcore esports guys. No, the genius of this move is this, Monty. The real reason you don't address this on your page is for the same reason, Monty, they deleted that Neon news post. Because you don't want to do an article that remember, the first thing that would happen if you address this on LOL Esports, Monty, is tons of people reading it are going to go, they might be running an event in Saudi. They don't know that. They're casuals. They wouldn't even be aware of this aspect. So you don't want those people to even be aware of what the scandal is, because there isn't a scandal to them. And then also, the fact they've deleted the Neon post makes his entire thing shit coming out of his mouth into a fucking punch bowl. It's a turd in a punch bowl. Like, the very fact that they've deleted the Neon post, guys, implies they are going to work with the Saudis further in the future, and that they're already essentially preparing the way so it's not awkward. Because here's another thing you could also point out, Monty. If it was true, it never was. Richard Lewis's reporting showed as much, that it was Riot who thought better of the Neon deal and didn't want to work with them. Remember, the whole thread, if you don't know, Monty, the chronology of why that guy in September last year made that stupid Reddit thread that was like, hey, at least we've got to like big up League for not being involved with the Saudis, is because it was when that story had happened where like Falcons had been declined to buy the Astralis spot, and obviously it was bought by Carmine Corp or whatever instead, right? So this dumbass's take was that like it was because of like it was in line with Neon, we can't have the Saudis in our league. Whereas the joke is, I imagine they probably didn't bid the right amount, or even better, like I could even see a world where Riot was like, you don't want to buy this Astralis one, it's not that good. Just wait a minute, I'll get you a better slot later. Like if you just hold down the line, I'll get you. I'll sort something real nice. Maybe Fnatic could sell us something like. I think they're probably more like that. But yeah, so that was what made people think, oh right, it's consistent. Riot just doesn't work with them. Whereas, as I've always pointed out, if you ever read Richard's reporting, Riot never had an issue with that. That really was just one of the real reason why I hate that story, the Neon story, is because it was a successful fucking boycott. And I'm told by everyone, boycotts not only don't work, they're harmful and no one should attempt them. It was one of the only ones ever, but it was because it was such an incredibly niche scenario that actually, if you weighed it up, the minor, it wouldn't have been huge, but the minor PR loss of doing that deal at that time, because all your own talent were turning against you on a beloved brand, actually was considered sort of like, it wasn't worth the deal to Riot. They were like, we'll give it up, in the same way as Blast had to give it up in CS for similar reasons. But what you really realize now is like that was never anything real. And in fact, Riot, quite frankly, were very careful not to make massive public statements about the Saudis back there, Monty, because that would have blown up in their face right now. So no, I just think that entire thread, bearing in mind it's presented as if it's like a case closed dunk in our faces and we're like idiots who don't know anything about the scene. It actually doesn't say any of the things you might initially think it says. In fact, as I said, it intentionally creates a safe area where they can backtrack almost everything they implied in the tweet. The joke is that you can actually just, as long as it's not literally called MSI, you could just not do everything we said before. Everything.
Right. And if you think that those statements weren't very specifically crafted by PR and esports comms people, you are incredibly naive.
Also, Monty, notice the third international comment even implies your Katowice call could still be right. That even is inferred within it. Now, just doesn't have to be the Middle East, right?
I have heard, let me be very clear about the Katowice content. I have heard absolutely nothing to verify.
Oh, it's speculation,
That's
of course.
Just pure speculation. Have heard stuff about the other stuff. But yeah, I mean, but it makes sense, right? Like it's another thing where the timing is just like really suspicious given the length of lock-in previously. And it also makes sense that you would have it there. I mean, there's been league events there previously. There's no problem with having the event in Katowice. I think it might be fun. I don't have an issue with that. But also because they already implied they want to do more third-party events. It could be a hybrid third-party event. I will also point out that even if it isn't run by ESL, the city of Katowice subsidizes those events enormously. And so if they are already planning to have esports events there, it's possible that Riot just tacks it on as part of a partnership with ESL. Maybe ESL doesn't produce it, but it's there in and around, IEM Katowice. It's just as a Riot event. There's lots of different ways you could do it. But yeah, I mean, I think all of this is still very weird. And like you say, the thing is, like, not only is it very clearly worded in a way that has obviously been spun by PR to give them as many
It sounds like a
outs
lawyer
as
wrote it
possible.
for real. It sounds like a lawyer wrote that like statement.
I mean, he is a lawyer, to be fair. He is a lawyer.
Okay.
But I do think that there's no way they release this kind of statement without global, like, esports PR comms being on this. So I think all of this was vetted. I think this is not him just saying this. I think they're doing it on his account for the reason you said, where it's only going to be hardcore esports fans that notice. But I'll go one further, Thorin. I think it's also so other Riot employees don't hear about this, because the last thing they need, because remember, it was kind of an internal revolt at Riot that turned around the Neom deal. And I think, like, if you put out an announcement on any kind of official channel or John Needham's, I think more people from Riot are likely to follow those channels, especially if an executive is saying something, or, it's on LOL Esports, right? And so I think, like, it makes sense that they wouldn't even want potentially the internal revolt or people asking too many questions. Although, Thorin, I will say, like, they probably thought they had to say something because people on the esports team were concerned about the amount of discussion that was going on around this, and they wanted to kind of tamp this down, because I would imagine that some people on Riot's esports teams were upset that this might be a reality. And so they probably started asking questions about it. But you don't want the whole company. You don't want thousands of people knowing about this if you can avoid it. So I agree. It's very calculated the way they put this information out. And it's very weird the person they put it out with. It's not even like John Needham, who does most of their, forward-facing communications about stuff. So very strange.
The way they always have to do it in this like stupid vague ways, like, hey, I hear the kids no, it's us, you dickhead. Like, you didn't like, I noticed there wasn't like John, like you say, it wasn't like John Needham's account replied to like some of the Insight VOD and was like, hey, this isn't true at all. That's not what's going on. We're not hosting events. Instead, you just like, bizarrely, we're supposed to believe Chris Greeny just woke up. Like that fucking party, like Avengers Endgame, where Thanos has completed it. He's walking through like his shack, like, I look across the world I've created. That's not true about the Saudis. Like, get the fuck out of my head. So anyway, there's that. Here's the maddest part, Monty. This is where people never think their points through. It's one of the most boring things about people in esports. Think of what the inference is. And this is why it's mad that no journalist had this comeback. Do you know what the obvious comeback to that stupid Chris Greeley comment is? So you're telling me you've just incompetently scheduled next year to have one of your biggest events of the year take place right before a third-party tournament? Like, that's terrible scheduling, Riot. They've owned themselves. Like, what? Like, think about what it means, guys, right? It's bad enough we just pretended EWC didn't take place and that all the leagues went up on pause for 1 week, except LPL, because LPL's just that gangster, right? And they just keep working anyway. So, like, no time off, motherfucker. Oh,
they paused for a few days. They paused for like a few days, and then they just started on Friday again.
There was still matches going on. So the thing is, though, like, that's the maddest part about this is, like, then if it's true what they say, if I take them at face value, then the calendar's going to be mental next year. Because think about it, Monty, you'll play the summer split into like MSI or spring split into MSI, into immediately you'll be at EWC. Or, by the way, the other implication's even more mad. If that's not what you do, and if you don't have a massive packed schedule, then actually he's just made an incredible blockbuster inference. The inference is this, Monty. You won't be allowed to attend EWC if you're an LCK or LPL team because you're playing summer and MSI. So which is it? Are they attending another event which is somehow going to be crammed into the calendar, or are we not allowed? Was it just this year that you go to EWC? See, the whole thing doesn't make sense. But like, the actual thing as he's presented means nothing. It just doesn't help anything. It's actually a lack of information.
So I do think that ESL will bend over backwards to have a LoL international event, especially with the very good viewership that they had this year, even if they have to extend the Esports World Cup. But the problem with this is that we have to assume that the calendar is going to be somewhat similar to the current LEC calendar. right?
Yeah,
And the
of
current
course.
LEC
If there's three
calendar,
splits.
right? So if we put MSI at the beginning of July, like they've said, okay, so that's 3 weeks in the first 3 weeks of July. But the reason why we have EWC at this week this year, first week of July, was because Riot has a company-wide break, right? And they've taken that time off previously without having an EWC. So I'm forced to conclude, like, are we just going to have a random week off sometime in August during Esports World Cup, where there's just no esports that week so that they can, teams can travel partway through that split? Or, because we know that basically regional playoffs are going to end in early September, because that's when the season finals is for LEC currently. And maybe it's a slightly shortened format, but you can only do so much if you're starting a split at the end of July or beginning of August after the new MSI timing. So what are we doing? Is it just going to be, oh, now Esports World Cup is the last week of August or something like that, and then you play a few more weeks? And is Worlds going to be pushed back? Would be my next question. Like, is Worlds starting at the beginning of October, late September? Or is it actually starting in the middle of October? In certain years, it has actually started in the middle of October, so that's not weird. It's also started in the middle of September in certain years. So there's so many questions about this, but if they are
I've
going
got
to
another question for you. If you're not going to actually acknowledge EWC as part of the official Riot circuit, then at what point in time?
That they are officially
then at what,
like supporting, by the way. They are doing
no,
that.
I mean, actually, I mean literally announce it as part of your circuit. Then at what point in time does it no longer make sense to compete in the EWC? As in, if I'm Gen G and LCK Summer is supposed to be like a top 4 event for me each year to win, well, then why am I tanking the first few weeks by going to EWC?
But see, the way that Riot positioned the whole EWC thing in the first place is that we're doing it because the teams want to do it. And Gen G, in fact, is one of the 30 partner teams of Saudi. So the answer to that question is Gen G will always go. T1 will always go because they're partner teams with the Saudis, and they want to be part of that massive prize pool that they can earn as across all their divisions as a team. So Cloud9 will always go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but think about this: if, as you say, we end up in a scenario where maybe the way you get around the MSI thing, so you don't just have another mini MSI 1 week later, is like you say, maybe you do it at the end of the EWC, you do it like they're doing in CS, you do it like at the end of the month. Well, then the problem becomes now the team, look, obviously I know the teams are going to say yes. It's not a literal question, it's a rhetorical one. Sure. The point is, eventually, especially if the prize money isn't insane, eventually you're just actually like, it's actually a disadvantage to go to this tournament if it's not part of the Riot circuit. That's like saying, like, if there's a fucking Grand Slam in tennis, do you want to come to this giant tournament with loads of millions of dollars, but it's not part of the tennis circuit? So if you lose there, you get 0 points on the tennis circuit. And if you go to the next event and the other guy had the week off and he recovered, then he just beats you at the real tournament. You know what I mean? Like, eventually it doesn't start to make sense that you have this thing that exists outside your circuit, but then uses all the top teams in your circuit while simultaneously never getting to be counted within the concept of the circuit. Like, that will eventually become like a maddening concept that doesn't really make sense.
Yep. Who knows?
Anyway, Monty, the thing is, if you could press a button, the summer split is here. But even though it's the summer split, you don't have to leave to get your nutrition and delicious food, because you can get everything covered by Factor. They've got their chef crafted 2 minutes ready to eat meals with different menus like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus. Like a good draft, you can pick a theme and stick to your goals to accomplish the type of lifestyle you want to live. Their never frozen meals are dietitian approved, and they have 35 different meals with more than 60 add-ons to choose from each week. So just like going from the LEC to LCK, where you're upgrading to that filet mignon, that shrimp, that blackened salmon, the quality ingredients. Keep your kitchen time to a minimum to maximize your gaming time. Head to factormeals.com/LFN50 and use the code LFN50 to get, you guessed it, 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LFN50 at factormeals.com/LFN50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. So you can stay active while not even having to leave your chair. There you go.
Very good. Thank you to Factor. Again, the best way to support us is to support our sponsors, guys. And we'll just put a cap on this one. I did say last week we're going to talk about the Saudi stuff, but we had to deal with this announcement that Riot made / didn't really make, because that's how they strategized and had a meeting about how they were going to do this and how they were going to deal with these suppositions. And so we're done with that now. Hopefully we won't have to talk about Saudi again. I hope I'm wrong, guys. I would love to be wrong about this. I don't want MSI to be in Riyadh. So I would love to be wrong. That'd be great.
I think another question I'd have, it's an obvious one, Monty. I would ask, are you ready? This is why, actually, people like Riot, well, one thing they could never survive for real is an interview with me, mate. They wouldn't even get 5 questions in because I even asked the questions, sadly, the journalists don't think to ask. Here's an obvious thing. Why would you be coming out on an even official account in the sense that you do work for Riot? Why would you, on your personal account as a head Riot person, be going out of your way to infer you won't work in a certain region? What's the problem with the region, sir? I've never seen that ever for anything else in esports. Who the fuck, Monty? If I said, I've heard Riot's thinking of having their event in Korea next year, right? There's plenty of reasons, I've pointed this out in the past, why Korea doesn't have the same values as the West. Korea has very different senses themselves about LGBTQ people, etc., right? But in no context ever would Riot ever make a post like, I can tell you right now that we are not planning to have events in Korea within the next few years, sir, because that would be a really weird fucking statement to make, wouldn't it? Because it almost infers, that people are unhappy with the idea you'd have events there because there's something wrong with that country. This is why the whole EWC Saudi thing is so infuriating, because what all this messaging and all this incredibly crafted, by the way, they're paying millions of dollars to PR people to do all this stuff, guys. All it actually says, if you listen to it, is, of course this is wrong. We know this is wrong. We're even applying a fucking PR full court press because we know how bad this looks, but let us now gaslight you that this is totally normal and it's not even weird that we're talking this way. It's like, bro, you wouldn't say this if the event was in Texas. You would never even dream to craft it this way. So you actually do give the whole game away by inference alone. Like the fact that you even addressed this is game over. Because that's the thing, like, Monty, again, if you'd have just said, I heard the event's in Korea, there's not even a scandal there. No one's coming out and going, that's not true. In fact, you might even argue it's good to have people debate, right? Have interest in the topic, have people speculate. You can even say, Monty, that helps when events are bidding. Hey, let's focus group. Let's see what people want out there. So why are you going out your way to go? You're not having the event there. It's because you know why people are concerned about the event being there, and it's nothing to do with the schedule I just said. It's to do with the whole human rights thing. You know that's what people want you to address.
That's also why I think this might be a negotiating tactic. It's just too weird. It's just too weird. It's like, well, we weren't planning on doing that ESL, so time to pony up some money if you want to see it there. It's just, I don't know, man. It's just so ridiculous. Whatever.
It's strange, isn't it? I know.
I would, it's again one of those times where I feel like you just say nothing. You just say nothing. And sure, it is, Riot has been announcing locations of events like really late. Like, for example, they didn't actually announce that MSI was going to be played in Chengdu in China, I think, until January of this year. So I don't anticipate that they're going to have anything probably until right before the season starts this next year. Even though, Thorin, that third international tournament is likely to be in early February, if I had to guess, based on the timing of like LCS lock-in and when they would want to run it. And so they may just have a surprise announcement like a month in advance about where this week-long like top 5 teams, top team from every region tournament is taking place. So it's very strange, like how long they're waiting to announce hosts. And honestly, Thorin, if we're being real, like MSI probably should be taking place in North America in this coming year. In 2025, it probably should be in NA based on the cycle of MSIs that they've had and how long it's been since an MSI has been there. So, I
mean, I'm just going to say, if you count up how many worlds and MSIs was there in NA, I think we can go a lot longer before you ever get to the point you're underrepresented, mate. I was like, half of them been there. Like, fucking half of them have been in NA at this point in time.
Partly
a minor region, by the way. I don't care what Riot says. A minor region in the game has hosted like half the international tournaments. It's mental.
Well, it's been a while since MSI was in NA, so I think that's going
to be my fault. They host it in Tallahassee and stuff. Money, I'd host it somewhere. Don't personally, That's like, imagine going to the arse end of China and having the event there. That's fucking mental. I know. What a world. What a world. What a world.
Yeah. Also, I mean, it's been a while in general since NA has had like a lot of stuff there because of the pandemic, because during the pandemic, all the stuff just got hosted in China or in their weird bubble in Iceland.
Or Iceland and all that shit.
Yeah, there was nobody who was actually, at these events. But it was, it was in London before that. Then it was in Korea. 2021 was in Iceland. 2020 was just canceled, right? 2019, it was in Vietnam and Taiwan. 2018, it was in Germany and France. 2017, it was in Brazil. Because remember, so literally the only MSI that's ever been in America was in 2015 in Tallahassee. So they've actually only ever had it there one time, and probably they were planning to have it there sometime in like 2020 or 2021, but the pandemic canceled one and forced them into the bubble in Iceland and the other one, and then it was in Korea, in London, and then in Chengdu. So, but based on that cycle, which they typically do with the major regions, which is like Korea, Europe, China, now should be NA again, surely, right? Surely. So yeah, we will see. I'm betting it's in Riyadh. It's weird how plans can change so suddenly, right? You know, you have this map, and then like suddenly some money makes something appear on it that wasn't there before. Strange how that can happen.
I mean, like you said, though, the actual thing that's so funny about the fact that for other reasons outside of the server, there's all these issues with having the events there, people push back and say, because as you pointed out on the last episode, it actually, in theory, that region, this is why it's kind of funny, they're trying to buy up all the sports. It actually is also sort of low-key the ultimate region for the time zones, believe it or not. Like, essentially, if you just make people play it like midday there or something, you can make almost every major region overlap. It's like, it actually is the sort of central hub of almost esports viewership.
Yeah, we talked about it in the last episode. Like, the funny thing is, Saudi Arabia's time zone is actually really good. So actually really good for international competition. Not good for live crowds. Great for online crowds. And you know what? I've always said, have a closed studio environment. You could do more interesting content. You don't need the live audience. We shouldn't be optimizing tournaments.
I would say the message of Saudi events is, who cares about the real live people there? Let's just all watch on the internet. That's sort of the message of the event, Monty. You know?
And we can play pretend about everything's going great. There are no guardianship laws, guys. Everybody's cool.
They drive now. They drive.
By the way, shout out to Richard's Substack, which, if you guys aren't subscribed to, had a very amusing satire article that he just released about excuses you can make to justify the Saudi takeover of esports, including they drive now, as if somehow that proves that you know, everything is fine and all problems have been solved.
By the way, just try that next time someone annoying in American politics complains about something. When they complain, just go, they can drive in that state, you idiot. What are you talking about? All the women are driving around there. Wait, haven't you been keeping up to date? It's a bloody utopia, pretty much. Florida, they're driving there for years, mate. What are you talking about? What your problems be? I think we should just start gaslighting them back, mate. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, Monty, you know. Maybe it'll work.
If you guys missed it, we did do an episode of The Four Horsemen this week about the state of esports journalism. So check it out. It's on this channel on YouTube.
Realized someone needs to make like a satire video of that famous track, Chamillionaire, like riding dirty, where it's like, they see me rolling, they hate it. It's all the Saudi women driving, like, they hate it. You could do something with that. You could do something with that for sure. There's something there.
That's great. I love it. So we did do a Four Horsemen about the state of esports journalism with me and Richard and Thorin and Kevin Hitt, all, you know, from the proud Saudi-backed esports awards, Journalist of the Year, all three of them. So pretty fun, guys. Check that out on our channel, and also check out while you're checking out other LFN content. Check out Last Free Nation Culture on YouTube. We've been doing we're finishing up our Paul Thomas Anderson arc, and we're about to start a hilarious arc where each of us picked a movie that we think the other two will hate. So coming up next is going to be the movie I selected, The 13th Warrior. And then we also, as our fourth film in that arc, have our great nemesis Roger Ebert. We picked a 4-star movie that he reviewed, in this case 500 Days of Summer, which he thought was great, but we all think is trash. So we'll also have an episode on that one, so we can actually get all 4 films. Have you seen The 13th Warrior yet, Thorin?
No, I'm gonna watch it tonight.
Oh, very good. I watched it again this past weekend. It was great. I like it. So we'll be on that in the coming week. So head on over to Last Free Nation Culture. Subscribe here, subscribe there, subscribe everywhere. Let's talk about some League of Legends. So let us start, Thorin, with Viper's very good week in the LCK. Holy shit, this guy is popping off right now. Unquestionably the MVP of last week in Korea. Hanwha Life, are they the best team? No. Are they the second best team? Maybe.
Also no.
Probably not, though. Also no. Is it fun
It's
to
always
watch
the
Viper?
tease, though. Like let's be real. That the whole point of the Hanwha thing is, it's why it's perfect they have Zika, mate. It's like they always what you say in English, like flatter to deceive. They always make you think they're about to become the real second best team, and then they just throw it in your face at the last minute.
But it is fun to watch. It is objectively fun, guys, to watch Hanwha Life play League of Legends when, you know, they're beating T1. Well, maybe not for some of you who are T1 fans. When Viper is popping off on Ezreal and Kai'Sa, like he did this past week, like incredible mechanics, incredible Ezreal
the
play.
champion pool for this player. If you know how trapped he is, these are the champions you can do something on, mate. You can actually 1v9 with these. I love it.
Yeah, show his mechanics, show his positioning, show his aggression by going in at the right time. Yeah, it is really fun. So if you guys missed, especially Hanwha Life versus T1, it was sloppy, but still a banger match. It was very entertaining.
And the rematch is this week, so roll on. Imagine if they lose 2 in a row. Ooh, that's going to be a spicy one, boys. T1 better get that one, because that EWC's faded into the distance, boys. You've got to get this Hanwha. If you get beat back-to-back on Hanwha Life, tell you what, those playoffs are going to be lit, mate. They will be lit.
I hope so, although I think the meta is going to be really quite different by the time playoffs roll around. Unfortunately for Hanwha Life, but for now, I mean, they are rolling. The T1 match, really exciting. There were a lot of throws, guys. There were a lot of throws. But if you are a Peanut Poppy enjoyer, and I am the peak Peanut Poppy enjoyer, you will love this. He has some great pathing, does a lot to get Rumble ahead, Thorin ahead on Rumble in the top side. There are throws because Hanwha Life doesn't understand who has teleport up and who doesn't have teleport up, or indeed in the game they played with Thorin, who had Ignite on Rumble, if their top laner even has teleport, because they're taking fights where you would think, oh, our top laner has teleport. That's why you're taking this fight, because he's the one who's 3,000 gold ahead. No, they're just taking a stupid fight at Drake so they can lose that and then maybe throw the game in the end. It was very down to the wire, guys. This series has some absolutely insane Baron coin flips where like both junglers are smiting simultaneously at like 1250 HP on Baron, on Drake's. Like, it happens multiple times. Peanut for some reason always wins the like pure 50-50 smite war. And Hanwha was able to steal the Baron and then come back in that game after being massively ahead, then throwing, and then getting a Baron steal to win in game number 1. Otherwise, it could have been a 2-0 for T1. But each of these matches is really close. And if you haven't seen this match, definitely do it. If you love Viper hard carrying and showing off insane ADC mechanics, this series, and also, the series they played against FearX. Not a good team, but it is fun to watch Viper style on people. And they're both sub 30-minute games in that one, so you can check that out as well.
And I just think it's cool because, let's face it, like the weirdest thing, if you think about the LCK and all of history, is famously Korean teams just don't tend to emphasize like hyper carry, mega 1v9 ADC players. That's just not the style of how teams are built. So I just think it's dope that you have one, and he's on a team that's like almost good enough to let him win all the games. So the cool thing is, much like when people like Flame was on Blaze as a top laner, like essentially the guy that you want to carry has to carry to win the game. So it's actually kind of like a cool little challenge, because I think it's actually dope that even though you'll never get your credit, because we all know how the all LCK voting works, Monty, and the problem is, spoiler, that will just be between peers and whoever comes second or whatever. Like they just tend to vote the number 1 team. Like, I actually think right now you could make a very strong case Viper's just been like the best ADC for what fucking years at this point in time, mate. Like his body of work is phenomenal at this point.
Yeah.
And he has to carry, so it's even cooler. Like, in a way, like, here's the funny thing. One thing people might not realize is, like, for example, when I talk about like Aaron Rodgers, I only complain about him not having help, Monty, in the sense that he didn't win rings. That's if you're having a ring discussion. In a fucked up way, I actually like that he didn't have help mix. It's how I knew he was cracked out. Like, he was thrown to people that will never even be remembered in 20 years. And he was just like getting like the fucking most insane touchdowns. I'm like, in a way, that's actually mega compelling to watch, because your guy has to ball out to win the game. So, even though I feel sad for Viper's trophy cabinet. I do enjoy watching him have to like fucking just fight his way out of the Bane pit every fucking game. It's kind of compelling. It's pretty cool.
I mean, he's
And he's
already
got the
a world
skills to do
champion.
it. No, but the problem is, though, he could have so much more, couldn't he? Like,
Sure.
you think about what people like Ruler have done. Like, this guy could
it's
have
not
so
like a
many
Dan Marino
championships.
situation where he never won
Sure.
like the ultimate tournament. So it's not that bad as far as things go. But yes, I do agree that relative to his skill level, his trophy cabinet might be a bit sparse. But it is really fun to watch him on this roster. The problem is like, you know, we've seen the ceiling of Zeka at 2022 Worlds, but he's never been close to that point ever again. And, you know, on average, he may have gotten better, but he's never actually like peaked that hard at any other point in time. And the rest of his team is just so consistent. Like when Peanut has a great game, he's probably like the best pathing jungler in the world, and he's an absolute delight to watch.
This is why I hate this team, though. Why, bro? Think about the league, right? Elsewhere in the league, why can't we just have like BDD or Showmaker play on this team? Like, wouldn't that team just be cracked at that point? Like, that would be like a real fucking world class third team or whatever. Like, Korea would be so
Why can't
dope.
Scout be on this team?
There's another one. Yeah, why not? Why not?
People were saying, well, Scout's not looking very good. Well, you might want to check
Yeah,
on the most recent games.
Yeah, they
like,
turned it around.
Scout is like big popping off now on LNG.
Yeah.
Actually having phenomenal games. So it was a bit of a dip in performance, certainly in the early parts of summer for Scout. For most of this year for Scout. But it does look like he's starting to like ramp up once again and, you know, even do well on champions he's not historically known for, like Yone. So, but having Scout on this roster would be really, I think, quite crazy. You just need somebody, you need more stability in another lane, because Doran is like really up and down historically, even though Doran does tend to turn out for playoffs, it must be said. Peanut, we know he doesn't, you know, he'll throw in high pressure moments, especially in international stages. Like he travels very badly to international tournaments. But domestically, he always seems to like pretty much, you know, be a top 2, top 3 jungler over the past couple of years. And we know his macro sense is absolutely amazing. So like, I don't know, man. It does suck a little bit. Like Delight is obviously also like a world-class support that's on this roster now. But there's just too much variance in the jungle and solo lanes that it's hard to have a lot of confidence in them, even though Viper has been really good this whole year. But he's like especially obviously good right now. And Doran and Peanut both have had like a rough start to summer. Like Doran especially has not been good in Summer Split, even though you see him getting fed in some of these games. Like it wasn't the easiest transition from him being fed into this meta, but he's always been a good GP player. Maybe he'll pull that one out again. It seems like Gangplank with the slow buffs to his barrels, maybe on the rise again, especially as we start to see more Jax, especially, which is a typical GP matchup. Gnar, you know, Renekton, these are all matchups that that GP has been in historically. So I'm curious to see if that comes out for Doran again. We got to see his Quinn again. Maybe I didn't want to see that. Yes, I know he was 4-0 coming into this match. Yes, I know it has been a typical Renekton counter, but he was not good on this champion. And I only really trust Keen on the Quinn in this matchup because it's so hard to play outside of the laning fights, outside of the laning phase and in team fights. And Doran didn't even get a good laning phase off, so it's pretty actually useless.
It is sad though that the talent just never comes back, because if people don't know, the other player who obviously could have come back is Tarzan, and instead he joined Weibo, and also they're now like turning it around again. So like
Tarzan is looking better.
These people never come back. These people never fucking come back, sadly.
Yeah. Tarzan again also started summer super rough. You know, maybe it was because he had some of the time off. Maybe it was because he was having a hard time adjusting to the new team. Maybe he was in a personal slump. But he has looked, I wouldn't say as good as he did last year, but he has looked like Scout a lot better once we actually got into the regular summer season and out of those placement matches.
This is where people have got to stop doing this thing, bro, where they just live only on like recency bias. Because, you know, obviously the two teams that we've just referenced indirectly is like Weibo and LNG both started really badly, and they're sort of gradually like getting the wins and starting to look good. The problem is, Monty, if you go and look at the rosters, what they're doing now makes more sense than what they were doing before. These rosters, both on paper, look good. Like, these are all like people who've played in the LPL. Some of them have been top players. Some have been all LPL. Like, the actual rosters on paper should always be good. If anything, it was shocking how bad they were in that placement time. It makes me even wonder if people had semi-phoning it in and treating it like it's not that important or whatever, you know, because now they're actually starting to look like the real rosters. So, like, the key thing is, right now, the LPL is getting so fucking spicy, mate. Like, that, like, we all hoped with all the quality, like, the parity is going to be bonkers towards the top end. It's why this format is dope, where you just put all the good teams together and there's no filler. You're just playing good team after good team after good team. I think this is awesome, mate. Like, I was skeptical because I thought, what if that Fearless thing fucks it up? But because it can't really like ruin the whole event, it seems fine. I don't have a problem with it now.
You have a lot of opportunities to get into the top group if you're a good team, even with the Fearless drafts, because you're playing a double round robin. So it's not that bad, I don't think. And certainly good teams have deep enough champion pools in order to handle a best of 3 in Fearless. Like, best of 5 is different, but best of 3, I think is very doable for them. Also, it just made the first phase where the matches may not have been that interesting if it wasn't Fearless draft a little bit spicier, right? Because it was a lot of like, it was intentionally seeded in a way where you'd have like a couple good teams and a couple bad teams, and you kind of knew who was going to be getting out of the group, which is why it made Group D, the one with like NIP and Weibo and Anyone's Legend, so spicy boost, because it was really unexpected how badly, you know, NIP was doing it first and then Weibo was doing. Would they just go into the hell group and like have to start at, you know, their best possible starting position would be the end of the playoff gauntlet, which would be a hell of a run. Didn't end up happening, but it was close. It was close. You know, I also think like the LPL format has produced some amazing games already. And it also, I mean, I would say it gives you a false sense about who's good, because sure, NIP has not looked good, and you look at their record and you're like, oh man, they haven't even won a match yet. Like, they must be super bad. Let's compare that to the other group, right? And you go to Group Nirvana, still hilariously named, and you're like, oh wow, OMG's 3-0, and you're like, oh wait, you know, 0-4 in the top group is still probably better than 3-0 in the bottom group, which will make, you know, I think there will be hype in the matches between the bottom teams of the top group and the top teams of the bottom group for the last spots in playoffs, because people might assume that those bottom teams would be actually doing better just because their records look better on paper. But we'll see. I mean, NIP has been super disappointing. You watched their FBX game. It was disgusting that was played yesterday. They had over a 10,000 gold lead in game number 2. They were already up 1-0 in the series.
Been a 2-0. Yeah.
Yeah, they managed to lose it and then lose game 3. It was a ridiculous throw. So that was very disappointing. Like, I don't think FBX has been on point, which is a bummer because of how they did.
People don't know, even though gradually Milky Way sort of leveled up again, he's nowhere close to the player he was the last split. Like, it's not like he's just 1v9 or anything, guys.
It's also just the drama, man. It was all the fucking drama with the team and the top laner and the, you know, it feels like a lot of the players may have just given up on that roster. Yeah. So I'm not reading too much into it. We'll see what happens with Milky Way next year. But yeah, I mean, he has.
It is wild for an IP, though. I agree, because the problem is, first of all, it's the usual summer split for a rookie team. Like, they make you believe in spring it's possible, even though they've got rookies stuff, and then in summer they all in. But the worst thing is, even rookies had some dodgy games too, so it's not looking great right now if you're an IP, put it that way.
I mean, rookies looked amazing on some LeBlanc games this year, and it has been like first pick worthy for NIP. But, you know, Aki's still questionable. Photic is just bad. Like, Photic is just like straight bad.
Shanji used to be one of the main people they relied on to carry as well, so that's why it's such a fucking alarming situation. This is also what happened in like V5, if people remember.
Shanji also, like, for all the plaudits he got on OMG last year, and like was doing, you know, they did place top 4 in the LPL. I would say like there was a pretty big gap between 3rd and 4th place in the LPL playoffs in spring, but they did place 4th, and like Shanji has been pretty good over the past, you know, year and a half, couple years, and he's looked really off form. Like, his Kennen play was like kind of wonky in some of these series. I have not really been impressed with him in this meta, so it's been rough for NIP. And sure, like, we may not have expected them to place top 4 again, given that like AL is leveled up, LNG is looking better now. Weibo is supposed to be better. Like, Weibo's roster should be better than the Weibo we had in spring of this year. FPX was like obviously a surprise, but you don't expect them to go 0-4 and Top Esports like still existing. Now, people look at Top and be like, oh man, they're 0-2 already. They're coming off of Esports World Cup.
They've got the hangover, clearly.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hangover. They also had to play BLG and LNG in their first weekend. LNG, this is the hot time for LNG. So I'm not reading too much. I think Top Esports will bounce back.
Sure.
In fact, I haven't seen the matches yet, but they are in fact up right now as we speak. In the match that's being played. So we will see how that one goes. They are currently 1-0 over Weibo while we're recording this. So hopefully on their way to their first win. So I wouldn't freak out about Top Esports in their ranking yet. Otherwise, it's been mostly, as we might have suspected, like LNG being undefeated, I think is probably the biggest surprise given how uncomfortable they looked in the earlier stage in summer.
Yeah, but again, like I say, you look at the roster, they do have some really good players, though. Like, to me, it was almost inevitable some of these teams were going to get it together. Like, I was actually shocked how many big-name rosters were that bad. It was kind of amazing. So, thankfully, almost all of them look like they're starting to get it together now. That's why I say that parity looks like it's going to be really good as we head towards playoffs.
Yeah. And I also just really appreciate that we have this format, because instead of having to like one good match every few days, we basically have at least one banger match every single day.
Also, remember, Monty, people are forgetting because of how big the old format was. Dude, it's done in like a week and a half.
Yes.
The regular split is over in a week and a half, guys. Like, this is why this format is really different. It's not like everything you complain about with the LPL, like it's drawn out, most of the games, but they've actually eliminated it all. Like, if this works, I actually think this could be like the future, because one thing I'm looking to, and I want to see if this happens now that they've changed the format, Monty, is I want to know, is the LPL ever going to get that like fucking pump that the LCK has now, where even the English stream can get like mad viewership and people all start to tune in to watch the finals? It becomes a tradition, because if that ever happens, like, then League will take another step up for me, because for some sad reason, LPL still has some niche quality to it for some bizarre reason. I don't know why.
I think, a lot of the people who typically like watched Asian League of Legends, because like, remember, there aren't that many new League of Legends esports fans, because there aren't that many new League of Legends esports players, especially in the West, especially English speaking ones. So I think like if you already were a fan, you probably are from the earlier LCK era, when Korea was more dominant and Korea was frankly much more accessible to English speaking viewers. There's also just, I think, a difference in terms of the spectacle and the feeling of importance of Korean esports. Like, now the LPL casters, it's not even all the games that are casted, right? You're relying on co-streaming for a couple days of the week, even if many of the casters also co-stream.
Yeah, they only do like the back half of the week or something weird, right?
It does. They only do like Wednesday through Sunday, so they don't do Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so, the casters co-stream it as well a lot of the time. And, Dom and Cadril are co-streaming it, and other people are co-streaming it. But, Motto, but it doesn't feel as accessible, right? When you watch the LCK broadcasts, like, oh, the casters are there, we're used to this, it feels comfortable, it feels more important, it feels better produced. All of the content in the downtime is translated with English subtitles, right? It's all there in front of you in a really accessible way. And you also have big name casters who people are fan of, have been fans of for years. Like Atlas has been at LCK longer than I was at this point in time, and not by a small amount too, like by a couple years at this point. So I think people have latched on to the LCK broadcast, and also all the players. Like, there's players with huge, Faker's the obvious one, but there's players and teams with huge amounts of pedigree within that league. You'd be hard pressed to like miss Chovy, if you've been watching League of Legends for the past 6 years. Whereas like, sure, Rookie has had his highs, but he also hasn't made that many international tournaments. And so I think a lot of the stars from LPL are a bit more inscrutable, less accessible as well. And, people have their legacy fandom. And so I think the LCK, like, if you're going to turn on an Asian broadcast in that time zone, you're probably going that way. Also, LCK has a lot fewer teams and like fewer matches, which also helps you follow it. But I think LPL is addressing some of these issues with the formats. And there's no doubt that LPL English fandom is increasing in popularity, right? I think that's definitely true.
The thing I've never understood though is, to me, the LPL has always been the most entertaining region to watch.
Sure.
Like the problem with LCK is a lot of the enjoyment is actually things like it's like things outside of the server. It's like knowing contextually that what they're doing is brilliant, or that was great shot calling, or do you see how they disengaged in this fight, etc. Whereas like the thing about the LPL, it always was the like fight to the death region, and people commit to all the skirmishes, and you don't get the LCK classic move. I used to always tell you I hated Monty, where the teams are about to start a fight, but then one of them realizes like, ah, shit, this isn't right, and then they all bail out, and it's like you sacrifice what, like, usually the support and one other guy, so that three people can escape, and it's like, what is this garbage? Like the Great Escape or something? Fucking fight, you idiot! Like this is UFC. I want to see you actually fight, not run away and fucking dodge having a battle. So the reason I also can't handle it's not bigger is because, dude, I've never been one of these people who pretends like all the fakers on the internet. I'm just here to watch like high level, like intellectual, the strategical moves. Like if people don't know, the old school thing that everyone used to be into in esports before streams was when you would download demos to watch like Counter-Strike, Quake, you didn't download the one that was the best match that ended 4-4 and was an insanely good. You download the one where someone shit stomps someone, bro, where you get to watch someone's POV as they destroy your whole like free-for-all server, or they beat a guy 42 to -2 in a duel or something. That is the LPL. Like, spoiler, pick your role. Are you a jungler? Well, if you're a jungler, right, you're probably bored of seeing like Yankos get put on Sejuani and play like a cover game as he stops ganks, right? So here's what you do. Boot up the LPL. Tell me the champion you like. Do you like Nidalee? Do you like Lilia? Right? Now I'll find you a game where a guy gets 11 kills on that champion and shits on the best players in the world. Same thing. If you're a top laner, who the fuck wants to watch, like back in the day when they made my boy play Dr. Mundo, right? No, you go to the LPL, keep like in Fiora, Lane Kingdom. Yeah, this is whatever role you like, the guy who basically plays your role like he's a superhero and everyone else is shit is doing it in the LPL right now.
It's porn.
Right now. Yeah, same with ADC. Spoiler, watch a ruler game. Their whole game's going to be set up for him, bro. Like, whatever role you like, they literally, you're like, exactly, your aspirational dream of what you think you'd do if you had faker skills is going on right now in the LPL.
I will also say, guys, that...
By the way, LPL hit me up. I could cut a fucking sick promo. No one could do your league like I could, mate. So.
Also, if you haven't seen the LPL's TikTok account, it is fucking hilarious. Like, it is straight fire. It is the peak of
loads
just,
of memes and shit.
Overproduced memes, like, you know, crazy kills with like psychotic editing. It's actually really good. But it is like very much, you know, no attention span TikTok generation, but it is really funny if you want to watch it. Like, they actually do a bunch of Western memes and stuff like that in there too. So whoever's running that account is brilliant. Like, it's very, very good. And the editing is very fun. So shout out to the LPL's TikTok account. It is wonderful. But it does, like, they've done a very good job of branding. I mean, I love the phrase "crazy is our game," which is the catchphrase of the league. Like, they're really nailing it. They should just rename it to League of Legends Pornography League, which is what it is. It's just like porn of LOL, where somebody's just getting hard fucked, right? So yeah, it is fun. Is it the highest level of competition always? Are there a lot of like teams that are good, like playing worse on the day-to-day in the league? Sure. But that's definitely part of the entertaining factor of it. And I will say, even though high level Korean League has been the king throughout kind of League of Legends history, and especially over the past few years, a lot of the LCK games are like horrifically boring, especially because the format that they're still using means that we get good games like a few times a week only, whereas LPL's basically got like a banger, at least one banger a day, 7 days a week now.
By the way, I also did used to love, like, obviously we've talked this many times about Korean culture outside of esports. Like, I love whenever Asian culture has that weird thing where they just love what they think are like pithy slogans, but in English, and they always like scoff the translations. So you know what, that famous thing, Monty? Like, I had like a fried chicken place I used to go to in Korea, in Seoul, where like on the wall, for no reason, it just said some mad thing in English, like, and there was a lovely little house that had good chicken or something. And you were like, what? What does that even mean? What, like I can tell what they're trying to go for, but they've like scoffed the translation. So similarly, one thing I've always loved in LPL is the way they've always embraced like fucked up English slogans. Like, dude, I forget the team. Someone will have to remind me. Was it LGD or was it WE? But one of them had an actual slogan at one point, Monty. I'm pretty sure this is how it was phrased. It was something like "Keep your dream," and they meant it, Monty, like, you know, keep your dream alive or something. But they almost said it as though like that's like what you'd do if you were like a shit team like KT that always betrays you. Like, you know what? Keep your dream, dickhead. You know what I mean? Like, mate, whatever the phrasing was, it was so mental how they'd scuffed this translation. But in low key, in like it's so bad it's good way, it made it funny, if you know what I mean. Like, that's actually a fucking hilarious thing. I know. It's a bit like that thing where they were also doing like, you know, during MSI or whatever, when they were like take notes or whatever.
Or how about become the unknown? That was the latest MSI. Like, I don't understand how the LPL, the actual Chinese domestic league.
What's the tagline? Become the. That's like a Lovecraft fucking tagline. It's like become the unknown. Like, what the fuck? Like, what are you talking about?
That's actually what they tell rioters when they enter the cult. Sure. Become the unknown. Welcome to Riot Games. But I don't understand how the domestic Chinese league can have a great English slogan like "Crazy is our game," and the tournament run by the global team who speaks English as a native language chooses "Become the unknown." How do these things happen? How do these things happen? Like, literal Chinese people are doing a better job than you at picking these slogans. And I know the whole "Become the unknown" thing came from Chinese. It was just translated super badly.
It doesn't make any sense though. Like, it doesn't actually mean anything. What, like, the problem is, Monty, what does it mean to become the unknown? Surely what they mean is like, I don't know, embrace the unknown, or like from unknown to known. It's like become the unknown is actually like, it doesn't make it not only doesn't make any sense. It's like almost the opposite. What you're trying to say.
It makes sense in Chinese somehow, but it definitely doesn't make sense in English.
Could be.
Apparently, like it's some sort of Chinese phrase, but it just translated super badly. So, yeah. Well,
to be fair, you could tie it together. It could be like one of those, like, you know, like Confucius things. Like Confucius say, man who play in best league in League of Legends world global scene becomes unknown because no one in the West watches it. You see what I did there? So there you go. Nailed it.
Well, when they have it in Riyadh, they'll call it the competitive drive to victory, right? Because they can drive now. That's great. Okay, let's talk about LEC, because I feel
also,
like
someone make an edit of like Baron Harkonnen from the Denis Villeneuve Dune films. But I want it to be Chris Greeley, because you could make them look similar enough. Edit it and then just have him on that scene where it's like my Iraq, it's my Dune, it's like my esports World Cup, my soon to be announced tournament in the Middle East for the next 3 years. Like, just have him doing that. I want that. That'd be the tone for me right there.
That's good.
And then about desert power, all that shit. Like, I promised you desert power, Monty. Desert power. There's so much you can do with the skits in it at all. Because, you know, that's actually the sad thing. The other reason we do eventually just need to get on and do like some green screen skits that we could do remotely is because actually we were doing it like in CS and Flashpoint, but the best people to lampoon would be Riot, obviously, wouldn't they? Like, that would be actually hilarious. And you know, it would get so under their skin if you made a funny like video that was like, haha, we're just bantering, but it was like just touching all the nerves. That would be so glorious, wouldn't it? Because you know they'd have to have a meeting and watch it with a bunch of their stuff. Like, look at this, look what they're doing. Just knowing that would happen in Riot HQ alone would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Their Slack messages would be hilarious. Have you seen this bullshit?
Oh, by the way, guys, sadly we can never show you this shit, obviously, but that actually low-key is the best thing about being connected in the industry, is when you have like a mole inside that leaks you like messages, so you get to like not only like do the shit you're doing, which pisses people off, you get to see internally how people are like raging and mouthing off their tits. Like, that's actually so satisfying. It's mad. It actually is.
It's great.
Like, when I found out that thing I've inferred before, that like EG was like trying to like fuck with me and Richard like legally or something bad, like to even know that's just like, oh, this is glorious. Just knowing that they were like, get them, shut them down. Like, I love it, man. It's so
as
stupid,
if there was a way to do that legally too.
Like,
we must stop them from saying things on the internet. Yeah, okay.
The part they fucked up there, if you don't realize, guys, is because we just did it by the book. We just told the truth. Like, there's nothing you could get us for. Like, it wasn't. The joke is, a lawyer would look into it and go, "But what they're saying is true, sir, and it's all factually based." Like, well, exactly what do you want? Like, there's nothing you can get us on. We haven't lied and made it up, have we? You actually did all those things. We did.
Yeah.
I love it.
Let's talk about the disaster that is LEC, because I don't know how you watch this as a European fan. Well, actually, I do know how you watch this as a European fan.
This last week was literally, if you think of the results, Monty, even though to certain fans of certain teams it was fun, these are the worst results you could ever have happen. There's 3 reasons why. So you're supposed to hope SK is the team that's turning it around this split, right? They're going to be a contender. That's dead. They were so shit in that game. That is dead in the
BDS
that is
well.
dead on arrival. BDS was supposed to be the team with the highest floor, except G2. They actually, for real, could have lost that fucking opening series. They were shit, and then they were nothing against G2.
Yep.
And then thirdly, what you need to believe if you want LEC to be good is that eventually Fnatic won't just be allowed to fuck around and then randomly, and they just did it again. They were actually dog shit every second from EWC to this match. And then in this match, they flipped the switch, which is the nightmare about LEC, and they magically did hands people. So, like, bro, the LEC's never been in a worse spot than this. Like, we're in such a fucking bad spot right now, mate. Because essentially, you wanted the opposite. You wanted BDS and SK to look awesome and then, really competitive match. Like, this looks bad right now, mate. This is bad.
Yeah, especially because you know that this iteration of Fnatic, like, the stars have to align perfectly, and it happens like once every 3 months, and they look this good.
Has played like that this entire year? Wasn't that like the series of the year for him so far? Like, I haven't seen that guy since last year, mate. Who the fuck was this guy? That was probably the best series he's had all year, for real.
I mean, Noah has been bad this year. And like Noah has looked much better in that series against SK, but it's like you have to wait for like all of the players to be, the stars to align, for all of the players to decide that they actually want to play well on a given day. But the thing is, you wanted this to happen in the finals, because now you know it's not going to happen in the finals, because it never happens that frequently. It's like, here's the one-off. This is the bait. This is the razor cake. This is the false hope right here about Fnatic, because they're just not going to look this good again. They're just not going to. Like, Noah is not going to have another day like this. Like, think about all the awful days they have. Like, everything that could go wrong on this team always goes wrong. The 2 most consistent players are Razork and Jun this year, period, full stop. But you don't know when Noah's going to have a bad game, Humanoid's going to get a huge lead and then int it away, Oscarina's just going to die 10 times in a game. Like, you don't know. Like, Oscarina can have really bad performances. So I think if you're a Fnatic fan, like, I am so sick of this Fnatic roster, because their floor is just disgustingly low. Yep. And the floor is so low that it's like high enough that they'll always like make playoffs, but you never know what the fuck's going to happen after that.
They themselves looked sus against fucking GX.
Oh, they were
like,
terrible.
Dude, they could have lost to Giant X themselves. So it's not even like I agree with you. The worst thing about Fnatic is they essentially have just like burned their potential now. And now we have to like balance out by regression to the mean over the next matches back to where they should normally be. Because you know what, Monty? The way that Fnatic operates in League is like that really annoying trope they would always do on Batman TV shows, right? Where they'd introduce the character of Catwoman, but you make it like she actually, like in the fucking background says, she actually has 9 lives, right? Well, if you know this, in classic American TV tropes, if you ever have a character like that who has 9 lives, they will always, because at the start with 9, they'll always just like piss away the first 3 on the most frivolous things, like that you'd never, instead what you do, if you had 9 lives, you'd guard all of them really carefully so you could never be defeated. You'd only die like very sparingly. Instead, what they'll do is they'll be like, I've got 9. And the joke is you piss away so many at the beginning over like random stuff like jump off a building or something, that like at the end, you've only got the 2 left. It's like, oh, I'm all done. Like, that's Fnatic now. You've burned it all on the BO1s. You waited all the time in the playoffs. You burned it on this SK series. And I agree with you. You just know that here's what's going to happen. Here's the prediction, guys. In the upper bracket final, Fnatic will either get 3-0 clapped or they'll win 1 game where Humanoid pops off. Then they'll go to the lower bracket. God forbid they do get the way past BDS and SK. If they go to the final, then they'll just get like comprehensively beaten by G2. And if that happens, like, here's why, if you're Fnatic, I actually do think you have to make roster moves after this year, because it's not even the context that you don't have a good team. You would in theory have the second best team over the year, Monty, if you look at the results on aggregate. But here's why, because at the end of the day, you are Fnatic. Like, bro, it's mental. G2 has been winning everything for like 5 years now. This is if you're Fnatic, like, You have to think of it like being the Red Sox or the 49ers. Something. You have to get back in the game. You know what I mean? You better get some championships on the board. Like it's like history is just only going to be remembering Europe as the G2 region. And you guys had the lead. You had all those fucking championships, all those great, amazing teams. You've got to have a championship team eventually. You can't keep being second best. This is whack. Come on.
We did go through the like Rogue Mad Lions era in like 2021 and 2022.
Still three though. They only nicked three. But I guess you got that one last year as well. You had four that got nicked. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, but the one last year was just kind of fake. You know what I mean?
It was whatever. Listen, Chasey is a champion of the LEC, while my friend Forgiven was just a bum who couldn't even make a final point. That's the reality I have to live in with fans. So. This is dope. This is awesome. By the way, just a quick question to all you out there who voted him all LEC last year. Where is Chasey? Anyone know? Anyone seen Chasey recently? I'm going to look it up on Gamepedia now. Does Chasey even play League of Legends? I'm just going to look this up. Chasey, does he play anymore? I have no idea, mate.
Is he in Turkey?
Apparently he's just listed as inactive on Mad Lions. Okay. He's still listed as being on Mad Lions, but he's just listed as inactive now. Okay. I mean, I'm just going to put this out there. I wasn't the biggest Chasey fan. It's probably better than Merwin now, though. Can't he play? Can't Chasey come and play? Right. He's all right at best, mate. He's not great, though.
But yeah, look, I think we did have, 2021 and 2022, there were some fun series that we saw. It was kind of like the rise of the good version of Mad Lions. That was when Rogue, the Larson Odoamne edition of Rogue was actually like, they did 3-0
off is very sad too. I used to like the fact they had their own distinct style as well. Yeah. Like that was dope. Yeah.
Yeah. So those were some better times, I would say. But yeah, I think it's just I don't know what it is. Cause like, G2 really, they weren't very dominant in 2021. Right. And they won one title in 2022, but they got clapped by Rogue in one of the finals. And if you actually think about, it's like the perception of G2 that's so interesting to me, because it seems like it was a long time ago since G2 was, wasn't super dominant, but it was only like a year and a half, really. But I think it's just the perception is weird because of the other times that they were super dominant, and we think about 2019 G2 and we kind of forget that there was a less dominant period in the middle of these times. But it feels,
by the way, what you're saying makes it even worse for Fnatic. Like in the time they haven't managed to win one title, Rogue's won one and Mad Lions has won 3. Like these aren't even the biggest orgs, for fuck's sake. You know what I mean? They don't, it's like they pay the most money. That's even worse if you're Fnatic. It's like, where's your title? Fucking hell.
Yeah. I mean,
and by the way, you have a great. Here's the reason why you've got to make roster moves, Monty. Because right now, as long as you keep Razork, you can have the basis of an amazing team for next year. Like, start with him, pick maybe one or two other players. Don't go too far, obviously. One or two. You can remember, dude. I think right now, if Caps is the best player in the LEC, then Razork's the second best. You know what I mean? Like, look, people like Hansama's cool and became. Yeah, that's all great. But if I'm picking like pure value, like we're starting a franchise tomorrow, Monty, and you get first pick, so you pick Caps. I'm taking Razork second, mate. Like. This guy's a stud. He's mega.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, I mean, he ended up staying on this roster, right? It's not like he hasn't been a sought-after free agent. Is that Fnatic, I think, understands his value.
So get a good mid laner, get a good fucking ADC. You know what I mean? You can build this team out. You can do it.
The problem Fnatic has is that people think Fnatic is richer than it actually is. Like, Fnatic is a team that has had very good rosters, and they've had very consistent levels of like finishes and worlds appearances, but they've never actually been the richest team. And so, Thorin, I think they just got saddled with this giant humanoid contract, and because of the way that the laws in Germany work, they can't get out of it. So I think they're kind of forced to continue with this roster until humanoid's like contract is up. I think that's the actual problem here. I don't even think they necessarily want to keep with this roster. They're just kind of backed into a corner.
I mean, I was told from people internally, no one will buy his contract. But the thing is, the problem is, it doesn't end until the end of next year. Bro, well, that's like that's too long. That's too long, mate.
I bet you we're going to see Humanoid as the starting mid laner for Fnatic in 2025.
Yeah, that's what's sad. Like, this is what's gross, too. People don't think this through, right? Already, since they played 2022, 2023, and now 2024. Dude, by the end of 2025, like, Razork and Humanoid will be like the fucking jungle mid that have played the most together, like, ever in Europe or something insane like that. Even though the joke is they will factually be the jungle mid that played together the most, Monty, while spiritually being the jungle mid that didn't play together at all, ever. Like, you get the premise there. So that's just going to be infuriating me. Like, why are we making this fucking roster? What is this shit? Because what's sad, by the way, is I even think they would both just be better elsewhere. Like, it's clear to me, Humanoid needs a very particular type of jungler. If you give him that, maybe then he even blossoms. Maybe you don't have all this downside. I feel like you're also just wasting your time. You're spinning your wheels playing together, in my opinion, you know.
I think Humanoid is just a player who lacks motivation. I think he is very fundamentally talented. I just think that he finds it hard to actively invest himself into the game outside of major international events.
I know what you mean, but the problem with that is, again, Monty, like, oh, poo, Monty, the problem is I'm really good at League, and sometimes I just can't be bothered playing for like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year because I'm just not that motivated. And so what do you do instead? Just like win, but not very good. No, just sometimes lose. Just sometimes lose, don't I? So it's like, what? Like, who's this guy? Fucking little Lord Fauntleroy. Fucking get it together, dickhead. You're getting paid a king's ransom, mate. Here's why I can't fuck with that logic, Monty. You're from Czech Republic, bro. Or Czechia, or whatever they call it now. Like, mate, you're not like someone it's not like you live in Beverly Hills. Like, dude, you're probably earning what like your entire family tree could earn in like 5 lifetimes. Like, I'd be pretty motivated to like change my family's life. You know what I mean? And like think about this. If you do a great job in League alone, you could set your whole future family up. Like, you can have all your sons and that. You can have broad businesses. If you do a smart job with this, just even think of it that way, bro. There's a motivating factor for you right there. Aside from how about be brilliant at your craft, be one of the greatest of all time. Because here's the saddest thing about him, Monty. His talent is fucking obvious. It's why everyone gets tricked by him. He does have not only a mad talent, he even has like an intuitive feel for the game that sometimes is genius. I've seen him have those games against like Scout and Faker where he's the better player. I've actually seen that happen. But then you take that and you just say, bro, can we just get like some professionalism and essentially can we shore up the weaknesses? Can we like get the bottom end and make it so that the average performance is good? You know, that if you play in a bad team, you still do, you know, you follow your protocols, you close. If he did that, he would be one of the greatest players ever to play from the West. But instead, he's going to go down in Monty, almost like those sports stars that like, this is obviously just to give an analogy because esports to sports doesn't one-to-one. He's almost like those sports stars that you hear of like Ronaldinho, where the premise goes that like they never ever practiced as much as they had to. You know, they were like partying or they were like disinterested or they had a whole bunch of interest with girls going on elsewhere. They were distracted. Like, you just think to yourself, what if? Because if you think about people, this is why, if you notice, I'm fans of certain players, I'm not of others. You know what? People might think Larson was a boring mid laner, but you get the vibe he put mad fucking hours in the game, mate. You get the vibe he really cared about being as good at his style as he could be. And whether that meant he won or lost, he can go out and you know what? He can do the Peyton Manning thing, Monty, where at the end of your career, you can just say, you know what? When you actually put in like all the effort you can just accept the results. You don't have to be tortured. But if you're humanoid, you're going to be the guy in a bar in 40 years going, hey, man, I could have been some, you know, you're going to be that guy. You're going to be that guy with that dog shit speech no one wants to hear, because it's true. You could have been like a guy with 10 LEC championships, but you're going to end with what, 2 or, you know, something like that, or 4 or something, you know. It's going to be sad.
Yeah. And, you know, this Fnatic roster should be one that is competitive with G2. Like, look, G2 is a good team. They're a great team. They're a world-class team. But if you my argument would be, Thorin, like, why isn't it that, so first off, for the sake of G2, that there aren't better teams in this region to give them an even better shot at performing internationally? But second off, if you have a world-class team in your region, how come none of the other teams are improving? How come Fnatic goes to MSI and looks like dog shit? How come they go to Esports World Cup and look like dog shit? Like, shouldn't they be getting better because they're playing against G2? Like, I don't understand how all of the teams in Europe can look so bad when they have, you know, who is G2 scrimming? They must be scrimming at least some of these teams regularly, and they just never actually get better. You know, we've talked about the GMing problems in this region and how a lot of the players are like weirdly placed on teams, but it's even just it just feels like everybody in Europe is just super demotivated at the moment. Like, even legacy players like Wonder and Yanko shouldn't be performing like this. Come on. And like, Heretics shouldn't be this bad. Why is Heretics this bad?
I mean, there's that thing where like don't have a star player. How's that real? By the way, that's one thing. I mean, me and Dom talk about the upcoming Best Damn League show, but the real bomber of Heretics this year is now that you know that whole Zviru thing was just fucking a blip on the radar that was irrelevant. Now you just wish you'd seen what would happen if Perks had played. You know, at least that would have been interesting, right? This team has nothing.
Talked about this team.
This team has nothing. It's just boring, isn't it? This team who gives a shit. Like, spoiler, if they lose, fine, they're not that good. If they win, well, they're just going to lose in the next match anyway. So it's like, who gets hyped about Heretics? Just nothing in it.
Also, still playing Smolder in summer 2024 playoffs.
Like, mate, they have to. They're sort of options. Think about this. They're like hard forcing fucking like in theory carry picks onto Flackhead, bro. That's where Heretics is at in summer of this year. Like that's the ultimate admission your team is just cooked, mate. You're supposed to be percolating to like championship form now. Like spoiler, that team knows it isn't going to Worlds, mate. They're just finished. What they're doing, Monty, is you ready? If you're someone like Heretics, all you're thinking is this following sentence. Only a few more weeks until my Valorant break. I'm calling it a Valorant break where you get to end the year early, like 4 to 5 months early, collect all the salary, but not have to work in League of Legends anymore. So that's what we call a Valorant break. They're about to get their Valorant break. Rogue's on their Valorant break right now. Vitality's on their Valorant break. Everyone's Valorant break's coming up soon. So just give them time. Give them time.
I do think it's very funny that like Rogue and Vitality just got to take 6 months off before anybody else in any other major region did. I mean, the whip is still cracking behind even the bad teams in the other regions, but they just get to peace out super early.
Also, just think how crazy that is, because if you are like the obvious person is like, look, I think Photon maybe had like a worse split this time. The obvious one is fucking Kazi. Bro, if you are Kazi, what did you do wrong this year? Can someone explain it to me? Like he even played really well in most of the games. Like he actually he had to come essentially like last place and have his year be done halfway in, even though he's not only a decorated champion, he's one of the best players right now. Like so again, we've got to fix these rosters, guys, because this is mental at this point. Like this is almost as bad as that time when Origin was 10th place in like 2020 Monty, and they had like Opset and Alfari who were like actually the best players at their position. Like I hate it when that happens, where you're just trapped in like a bad spot. You know, it's just gross.
Or
you want the system. You want to incentivize the great players, so you don't want to have it half a year off for fuck's sake. Come on,
right? And you know the problems with BDS are just going to proliferate. I think what's so upsetting about BDS's playoff performance so far, Thorin, is like they were supposed to be the well-coached, disciplined macro team, and they were playing horrible macro against Mad Lions. Like they literally were just giving up vision for free. Like they weren't even playing around their own super minion waves at the end of game number 3. Like they should have lost basically every game in that best of 3 series. And that's really just not acceptable for this team. I do think that Mad Lions was smart to ban the Jinx for the first couple of games, which is, you know, what G2 also did, because you can see what happens when the Jinx comes into play in the 3rd game, which is like, it gives them a window to like win a team fight and then, you know, pull the game back from the brink. So I do think that is very savvy, because Ice has been very, I mean, it's not even a Jinx meta really. It's just like a fringe meta pick, but that is something that they've been favoring, and it worked out really well for them in that context. So the Jinx ban is kind of necessary, but like Adam on this champion pool is not it. Sheo on this champion pool, that ain't it. Nuke on these champion pool, that's not it. Like the meta feels super janky for them, but even then I expect them to at least have like better calls. Like they're just botching their calls now. Maybe they're flustered because these are game states, or they're falling behind in ways because they're kind of individually not great at these champions. But I mean, the series against G2, they basically got bopped, even when they had substantial advantages, like Adam's advantage, you know, through the lane swap on the Malphite, ending up being, you know, relatively, you know, good at the start of the game. But there ain't no way that Adam's going to be carrying these games, even if you get him ahead on these resources. And then he does things like, here's something funny.
He played like a bomb. He played like an actual bomb, man.
Here's something funny. So in the Mundo game, so he ends up building Warmogs into Heartsteel. So he's building HP items into Lucian, Caitlyn, and Aatrox, with a Sejuani in the jungle and a Renata Glass support.
Made is, bro, why are we doing a Dr. Mundo pick when you are Adam? Like, bro, it's Aatrox. Like, surely you have an angle of like a fucking a Darius. You know what I mean? You're Adam, bro. Like, if there's ever a time for you to do one of your picks, this is it. Like,
yeah, but
bro, it's right there. It's right there. None of them are even banned. You can pick them. You go for it.
But here's the thing: why are we doing 2 HP items when you can build some armor? And like the value of Heartsteel. So when I was on my stream reviewing this game, Thorin, and I saw him buy Heartsteel, I literally just obviously I hadn't seen this game yet, so I ran a prediction on my stream about how many Heartsteel stacks he would actually get, because you have to auto a champion to proc Heartsteel.
It's gonna be fuck all.
So I guessed actually correctly, which was crazy because of the game state. I was like, how many autos is this guy in a team fight? Realistically, they were already losing. They were like losing inhibs. I'm like, all right, I think two Heartsteel stacks.
That's gross. Okay, is that what he got?
2 Heartsteel stacks, which he got an extra 83 HP, guys, from that Heartsteel. And if he had actually had an armor item, he may have been able to fight in some of these team fights. So no value from the Heartsteel buy whatsoever. So really wild, like his itemization, especially in the face of like the only AP damage being Sejuani and Renata Glask. Like, what are we doing with this HP stacking where you can't? I mean, he's not the joke is he's not even HP stacking because he builds Heartsteel so late that he never gets any procs on it. So really weird play by Adam.
Here's the person I want to highlight, though. Mate, you actually have to just give it up to fucking Ice, though. This guy is a 25-year-old Korean, never was, who played a little bit for Live Sandbox and was just playing in the shitty Ultra League last year, Monty. And you watch, here's what's crazy about that guy's game. He doesn't seem to be affected by anything negative that happens in the game or from his team. He just plays. The guy really it's like he must have the craziest, cleanest mental ever. He just plays his job out like it was solo queue. He's just in that situation. He just plays it out correctly. Like, dude, he's never going to be the best ADC, but he's a fucking good player. And like I say, mate, it's like consistency is very admirable. This guy's like, what a find this player is. I thought for real they'd tank this roster when they kicked Crownshot, but like, amazingly, they sort of did find someone with the skills of comparable to Crownshot with none of the ego. Like, fair play to them. Whoever scouted this guy, you fucking nailed it, mate. Well done. What a great signing.
I also think, you are seeing that the European teams are getting really good value out of, up and coming or challenger Korean bot lanes.
I was making this point on Best Damn League Show. I basically said at the point, that whole take we all had of why would you recruit anyone except the best Korean? Because you have the RL player. Dude, I'm going the opposite way on that now. It's the other way around. I only want you to recruit the best ERL players, Monty. If it isn't the best ERL players, at this point, as you've seen from Jun and fucking Rahel, etc., dude, even like a mid-level fucking Korean talent could be a star in our league.
They're also cheaper.
It's just plausible. Yeah, of course. Of course. But that's just that seems like that's the place to scout right now, mate. Yeah, I'm with you.
I also think they're just more motivated. And I think also because of Korean culture, they tend to try and, adapt to the team more. Their focus is always going to be mostly because of cultural reasons on the team game. Right. And so I think they're much less likely to be disruptive in team environments. They're going to be cheaper and they're going to be good. And how can you argue? Sure, Noah was a huge success in the first half a split he played and has been pretty spotty since then. But Jun has been fucking fantastic since Fnatic picked him up.
Jun is the guy who turned Fnatic around, right? It was him working with Razork that turned that fucking team around, mate. Yeah. Rahel made SK contender.
Been good. Yeah. No. So it's been, I think we've seen the success of many of these Korean bot lanes, and that's not even mentioning some of the top laners like Photon who have come in. You mentioned Chasey, and sure, Chasey's not a team now, but he is a champion. Like, he was able to propel. Yeah, so are other top laners on on Mad Lions who may not Arbit. He existed. He wasn't Korean. He still won a title somehow. So, but I do think a lot of these challenger players are going to be looked at more seriously by some of these European rosters. And I've seen people predict I think, there's going to be even more of these players within LEC because it just makes sense. If you are going to be a team that needs a fix, and I think Fnatic didn't have money to splash out. They don't have money to go get Carzzy right now, I'm pretty sure, and replace Noah. and they want a Korean-speaking bot lane. I mean, they got rid of Trimby, and everybody, including us, said, wow, why would you get rid of Trimby for Jun? And Jun has been good. I mean, I don't think he's been as good as Trimby was on his peak, but at least he can speak Korean to Noah in that lane, and it seems to be working okay for them. And his individual performance, especially on engaged champions, has been very solid.
And also, as you say, the joke of it all is the Korean player might actually even be cheaper with how it is right now. Because the difference is, while like 4 different teams battle over some ERL prospect, and you have all this drama with Linchas and all this shit, instead you have some guy where, as we say, if this guy's playing in DRX or fucking Live Sandbox or, you know, fucking UP in the LPL, you could probably pay more even if you're just like the 7th best LEC team. Why wouldn't you be able to? Of course.
Yeah.
They're not getting much money in these teams, guys.
And clearly the scouting is working well. Rahel and Luan have been an amazing revelation in LEC. Like, I don't think without them that SK is in the position they're in. Sure, they got bought by Fnatic. We'll see if that holds true for the rest of the playoffs or not. We've got a lot more, we have, it's not only these playoffs, Thorin, but it's going to be obviously, once we get to the season finals as well. So it doesn't stop here, guys. Like, the summer playoffs, they're going to end in a couple of weeks, and then we're going to head straight into the season finals, and it's going to be, that big bracket, right? Depending on championship points, who ends up getting in.
Monty, I think we need to expand the concept. In the same way as KT Rolster as an org was the Razor Cake, I'll tell you who the LEC Razor Cake is. It's obvious. It's Nisqy. Bro, every time you think he's got it nailed down and his team's looking really good, and are you ready for the dreaded thing? You start saying things like, maybe Nisqy's all LEC. Maybe he's the MVP. Get ready, because that next playoff, he's going to get absolutely booty blasted out the server. He's not going to be in the game, mate. Like, this guy is one of the craziest teasers I've ever seen, mate. It's actually wild, isn't it? He does it every split, it feels like.
Well, I think the thing is his level just doesn't change. He's like, when other players are demotivated in the regular season, he's just very consistent. And when other players ramp up in playoffs, he just doesn't ramp up. He just stays at the same level at all possible times. It's very, his floor and his ceiling are like an inch apart. I think that's the problem. It's like there's never any room, and his floor is very high, to be fair. But he's not the
player, yeah, of course.
Yeah, he's not the guy who is gonna. I say this. He has won titles. He's not the guy who's going to be probably the one to win you like a lot of consistent titles.
Also hasn't won that many. He won one bullshit online one in NA when there was no competition. And then he won this bullshit one in Mad Lions last year. That's it. There you go. That's it.
But the thing is that everybody is always going to be wanting to have him. That's the thing.
Oh,
is because he sets your team floor really high too, because he is a team player and he is the guy who helps out the jungler. So you can actually run a lot of different rosters. Like, he has a very respectable champion pool. He's just not that guy who's going to like have that fucking insane finals performance and get you that trophy. He's going to enable somebody else to do that maybe. And also if he gets a lead, he's just going to tower dive and give up the bounty gold.
Technically, Monty, he can be the MVP in the finals just for the other team. So, so there is that angle, because man alive, this guy can also int like a motherfucker. It's crazy, isn't it? He's got like some fucking Hillesang Jr. in him. You know what I mean? Like, there's just moments in the game where he's like, I'm just doing shit. It's like, what are you doing this? You know, please. It's wild. I've seen him in some bad fucking games, mate. It's wild. I can't trust this guy and play. You know what, Nisqy? I'm going to stop fucking betting on your team. I'm sick of losing betting on this motherfucker's teams and players. Mad Lions back in the day, SK now. I don't believe in Nisqy anymore. I no longer believe in Nisqy. I'm a Nisqy atheist. There you
go. I do think SK is going to, continue to plow through these playoffs, though, because they're going to
better bounce back. Come on. We need them to make the playoffs interesting.
I mean, surely they can be the winner of Mad Lions Koi versus Carmine Corp.
That seems like a slam dunk. Come on.
Which, by the way, is absolutely delicious this next week, Thor. The fact that these are the two teams that are that one of them is going to be eliminated in last place of this playoff bracket in this best of 3, and they're playing each other is so deeply funny. I'm loving this.
Well, one fan base is just going to be sad as fuck, aren't they? Think about the 2 worst fan bases both going at each other. So it's like, yeah, let them fight. Let them fight. Godzilla time, motherfucker.
The thing is that Mad Lions actually has enough points that they've already qualified as one of the top 6 teams So Carbine Corp.
Yeah, but that's
actually,
going to be glorious, Monty. Just wait. If you thought the format was scoffed before, when this Mad Lions gets to play in the season finals, are you fucking kidding me? They are going to get murked. It's going to be so bad because that's the
Also-
equivalent of the LPL group. There's going to be no bad
Yep.
teams in there, Monty, except them. Just them getting bonked by everyone. It's going to be hilarious.
It's just more torture. It's just the torture of hope for the Mad Lions fans. I just want to give a shout out to Rogue, by the way, who secured exactly 0 championship points for this entire year.
That's impressive.
They literally got bounced out before, like in the bottom 2. Every single split.
Yeah, guys, even Carmine Corp has 45 points thus far, and Rogue has 0.
Because they've
actually got a 0.
Because
like,
they made it
essentially, guys, literally, if Rogue had just said at the beginning of the year, we forfeit all our games, the result for them would be the same. That's actually that's how stupid you know when he used the colloquial term, this year was a write-off. It really was a write-off. By the way, mate, what the fuck did Larson do in a past life? What the fuck did he do to deserve this, mate? Like, he must have been on some wild shit. I know.
He got a title.
I know.
He betrayed
Yeah, but this
Odoamne.
year is
That's what he
pure
did.
suffering, though. This year is pure suffering, mate. It's bad.
They had to sacrifice Odoamne for that title, Thorin, and now he's dead, and they can't ever get a title again, right? That was the deal with the devil.
You know, the worst thing about that as well is it didn't work out for anyone. Think about it, right? Odoamne doesn't even play League. He's like guesting on LEC. Malrang's in Brazil, by the way. Insert your own jokes. That's League prison right there. Malrang's doing a life sentence in Brazil.
He's just method acting the jungle. That's why he had to go to Brazil. He wanted to become the jungle.
Larson and Comp are stuck in Rogue, which has 0 points. And Trimby is on a Heretics, where even though he's one of the best facilitating players, there's no one to facilitate. So it's like, what was it all for? What was it all for fuck's sake? It's just garbage. Everyone's career and life is worse because of you, GM of Rogue.
Also, not related, but Vitality is also just cursed until the end of time. No matter how many
Oh, it's
rosters they
wild.
make, they're just doomed to suck forever for whatever
Dude,
reason.
you know the saddest thing about the Vitality one is the Vitality one is actually the reason why I have such a hard time being rude to the LEC owners. Because, bro, on paper, all that org has done is
They
just
tried
recruit
so hard.
really good players.
Yep.
Think how many, Monty. This is the equivalent of like an NFL team that just signs like all NFL talent. Like they've been signing like all LEC players for years now, and somehow none of the rosters
just
ever
get
work.
fucked.
It's mental. It's actually mad, isn't it?
They're like, let's take a flyer on this Chinese prodigy and put all these resources into teaching him English and getting him integrated with the team. Nah, you just get fucked. I mean, it's like they tried everything that you could possibly imagine. Is the Vitality headquarters like built on an Indian graveyard or something? It's wild how cursed this team is. It's just doomed right from the start.
Like,
It is
for real, if you
almost
just run down the
Lovecraftian.
list, mate, it is mad. Like, their list is going to be like the Hall of Fame of European League. It's like they've Perks, Alfari, Kazi, Hillasang. Holy dude, it never ends. Fucking like you got Vethio was the MVP
Yep.
of the league only a few years ago. By the way, Photon is mega. Kazi now. You have fucking who else? Perks, Self-Made. Who else? Upset.
Yep.
Like, mate, it's
everybody.
mental. Like the talent list is bonkers. Yeah, you keep go Crown Shot. They've had all these players. Did they have Crown Shot?
Yes.
Yes, they did. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They had Labrov even 1 point. They've had everyone. It's actually mental. Fucking hell.
It
can't catch
either
a
they were
break.
on some of them they were too early, on some of them they were too late. Bo obviously as well. So like I think it is very weird to see Vitality. I do want to talk about, because I think you're going to be very good at contextualizing this, but potential news coming from the Counter-Strike scene, which is Rogue is now rumored that they might be purchased by Falcons. And for those of you guys who don't know,
Makes sense.
yeah, it does make sense. Falcons is the Saudi team with, I put this in quotes, mysterious ownership, right? Like, they won't say that it's the Saudi government, but they also won't say it's not the Saudi government.
Much like Chris Greeley, they won't just make the obvious explicit denial, which would make the case closed. So it's inferred that there's a reason why they won't do that. Yes, of course.
But and this is problematic, obviously, because there's a massive conflict of interest when there's a tournament in Saudi Arabia hosted by the Saudi Arabian government, produced by a company owned by the Saudi Arabian government, with a team playing in it that's owned potentially by the Saudi Arabian government. what does that mean, right? And because Falcons has so much money out of
By
nowhere.
the way, I can already tell you when they did the first Game as 8 last year, before it was called Esports World Cup, Team Falcons, before they had a good lineup, Monty, when they had a lineup with like French players and people that weren't famous, they got invited to that tournament. So what you're alluding to, like, there's a world where surely they just get crowbarred in EWC every year if they get bought by Rogue, right? If they buy Rogue, rather.
Yeah,
Seems logical.
Probably, right? That's what you
If
would
it's your
assume.
team, why wouldn't you?
Yep.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
And also, for the purposes of the Saudi World Cup, like they have signed something like 20 different divisions across all these different esports. Some of which, they've already won. And I think that what they won called Warzone, I think already.
I know they have a daughter team that's very good.
Yeah, so they've got a bunch of actually extremely competitive teams across a variety of games on the world stage. And so, when you look at this, you're like, okay, well, we know now, and if you guys don't know, they tried to buy Astralis' spots last year, which is the spot. Didn't that spot become Carmine Corp? I think it did. Yeah, that spot became Carmine Corp. They tried to buy it last year, and Riot actually turned them down because I'm sure they offered more money than Carmine Corp did. And the question is, why does Riot turn this money down? Well, one of the things that Riot does is that they mandate that ownership must be disclosed of their teams, which Falcons may have just straight up refused to do, right? And also, if Riot is thinking, hey, we're going to keep, if we're going to sign off on this Esports World Cup, by the way, guys, the news came out that the Olympics Committee magically selected Saudi Arabia to hold the International Olympic Committee has said, with Saudi Arabia, you're going to get a bunch of esports events. And they're allegedly, according to the reporting that's been done, talking to Riot about letting League of Legends there and stuff like that. Well, what happens in these situations where you have the Saudi government involved, and that would be nations based, so I think it's less of a concern in League of Legends. But what happens if you're doing Esports World Cup? What happens if there are Riot events? What happens if at some point down the line MSI does end up in Riyadh? Well, and then Falcons is invited, right? Or Falcons qualifies to that tournament. How can you make sure this is unbiased? Because even though Riot has, I would say they say that you can't have ownership in multiple teams. The reality of that is we know that, the rules were bypassed, especially in
Golden
Fnatic's
State
favor.
Warriors shit famously in the LCS. There was like multiple investors in the same orgs,
Yeah,
and they were allowed 2 years to divest or whatever. So they've always played fast and loose. It's obviously just based on if they like
whether
you or
they
if they
like
don't
you.
want to.
Yeah, whether they
exactly.
like you or not, because like Fnatic was also demonstrated to have, owners that were part of ownership groups of different teams, and they did nothing. They said, you have 2 years to unwind this investment, which is I wish I had gotten 2 years to unwind my investment, guys. I didn't get that, obviously. But when you look at Falcons, they are very opaque in terms of their ownership structure, and it wouldn't surprise me. You'd be like, well, why are they opaque to Riot? Well, they don't give a shit about Riot at the end of the day. The Saudi government is much bigger than Riot. So I don't think they care, especially when they can participate in all these other esports. But what is your take on Falcons and why Riot wouldn't necessarily want them to be part of the LEC, considering they would probably spend a lot of money on the team and on the players?
I mean, my take is this, Monty. I don't think they were saying to them, we don't want you and we don't want you in LEC. I think what they were saying was, we'll give you a slot next year or we'll get you a... Because to me, the reason you let Carmine Corp is just that fan hype. It's like they were the one for years simmering in the LFL. Everyone knew they had the huge fan base. Everyone knew they had the blue wall and all that jazz. And you knew, by the way, as well, that when they come in, they will invest and they'll do things like get the stadium and do all the things you want teams to do, because what you want to show is this is essentially Carmine Corp in some way is the legacy of what you tried to do with the LEC. You've tried to create a league where these separate countries could have their own sub-league, and one day it would build up to a point where you'd have authentic grassroots fan base. In theory, Carmine Corp is everything you always wanted in LEC. So to me, I think they would just they'd already been rumored they'd buy in past years. I think they were just first in line, as it were, Monty. But I actually think if you're the Saudis, it was almost like, we'll get you on the next one, because I think that it's logical they buy in. And by the way, here's what's going to blow people's minds. Bearing in mind, I don't control if they buy in. If they do buy in, Monty, I'm actually in favor of it, because the good news is they haven't done it yet in CS2, but it's constantly rumored they are going to. The premise in CS, Monty, is they're just going to keep spending money until they have one of the best teams. They're just going to keep doing it. So that's why there was news recently that they've again supposedly gone and tried to get Nico and Monacy out of G2 and CS. If people don't know, Nico's one of the best players ever, and Monacy is the best player right now. So if that's inferred what you're going to do, and if you don't know, in CS, they literally bought the best coach ever, Zonic, who'd won all the majors in CSGO. They bought Magisk, who was one of like the role players who won loads of majors, was even a major MVP. And then they bought the core events, who was like at the time like a top 5 team. So there's the reason why this is good news. Because think about what we just talked about with Rogue, Monty. Essentially, Rogue did all of their success through scouting. Remember, they had those players on their academy / their ERL team in the Ultra League. Then they used people who were veterans like Odoamne and Vander to guide the young players through. And then eventually, after doing a mixture of like small roster moves and academy promotions, they had a lineup that won the championship and had all those times in the field. But then the problem they had is that's like being an NBA team that can only do it through drafting, and then you lose the drafted players. Well, now you have to buy the players, and they're not a team that's ever shown Rogue that they have the big box and that they can attract the big talent. Like, think about who the biggest names to ever join Rogue are. Bro, it's nobody. I'm serious. If you think of like people they've signed, not people they brought up from an ERL or their own ERL team, it's nobody. They've never signed big. The joke is like Odo Amley's probably the biggest name ever that they've signed in that whole org time period. So you already see like that org was not an org that was willing to put mad money out there. Dude, I think Falcons will mix it up. I think they will come in this league and they will potentially buy these big names and make like a super team. So I'm on that level. Once I get past the business things and what I think of them outside the server, I think it will add to the LEC ecosystem. Like, I'm sort of looking forward to it. I want to see what happens. I want to see if they come in and they do, like, as we said, dude, maybe this is the team that comes in and then you go to Fnatic and you go, you know what? I want Razork. Here's 1.5 times what he's worth. Hey, again, like you said earlier, Fnatic isn't some like giant Yankees team. They're a team that if you offer them more than the value of a big contract, they should probably take it. They themselves should re-up with a different player and take that deal and take their own ERL talent or something, right? So I actually think Falcons could be the game changer in LEC. Like this could really mix up the ecosystem a bit.
I mean, again, it just depends on who they end up actually hiring for it, but it does seem like they're very committed to overtime. I mean, didn't some of the CS players like refuse to play on the team because it was Saudi owned, even though they were offered a lot of money?
Did that. It was just Twists who went to Team Liquid. He turned it down. Now, I will say he also was in a very privileged position in the sense he not only had Team Liquid, suppose he had an offer from Vitality, who at the time was the #1 team. So he was on FaZe Clan, which was also like a top 3 team.
Yeah,
so he was in like the best position ever. But he did publicly himself say he didn't want to be involved with that shit, and the inference was because of the Saudi. But that's the only player I'm aware of publicly has ever like implied they won't play there.
Yeah, I mean, also Twist is not only really good, but he also has a massive North American fan base that he brings along with him, right? So his value is pretty crazy, I think.
I also personally predict that comment will age very poorly, because here's the part he hasn't thought about, Monty. He's acting in his brain like the current setup of one Saudi team is how it will be. I personally predict in about 5 years, he might have to magically join a Saudi team, because what is he going to do if they buy like half the top 10 or something, you know, like, because there's the other thing. In the same way as we're talking about in LEC, I think there's a world where in CS, that's the other move you do. When these teams start to look for investment again, you just come with your million tentacles of abstraction. You have a sponsor for this guy, a partner for this guy, an investor for this guy, sleeping. You do all that, and eventually you just have half the top 10, and then they're all playing in your terms. They're all in the EWG. Why wouldn't you? It's the game plan Nickel and Ion put out himself all those years ago. The difference is the Saudis can actually execute on it. So I also think that will stage poorly. I think he'll find out one day. And by the way, even if he doesn't join their team, Monty, as Richard's pointed out, it's inferred eventually everyone's going to be there as like a second hub anyway, and you're just going to be boot camping there and going there for tournaments in the off-season. You're going to be doing everything. So we'll see if that one works out. And I don't think in League anyone's going to say anything. Like, I think one thing I actually think a fair play to them, if it's true, I think League players already don't think of themselves as being able to speak out against things like that anyway. So I think League players won't say anything. They'll just join the team, mate.
Yeah.
Don't give a fuck.
I also, and to put Rogue into context, guys, so Rogue was actually started by Sterling VC, which was the Wilpon family, and they own the New York Mets, the baseball team in New York. And they were also, I think, funded by Bitcraft, and they were part of some like tangled web of like esports investment and bullshit hype companies for a while. They also owned...
Now you think they were owned by fucking Roger Sterling from Mad Men, who's having too many martinis on an afternoon and passing out not knowing what he did. It turns out he just transferred onto Amne or something. That's not a bad reference there. You know the show. Still the head fox.
Yeah, so like they like, oh, it was Rect Global, which acquired
Yeah,
them, which
there you
I think was Sterling VC
Even
as
though,
well.
even though they did that to me down with the kids, it's even spelled REKT.
I know, it's
Like it's like
terrible.
wrecked never sounds good, not least because it sounds like the word rectum. It's like wrecked global. How about? How about? How about?
So yeah, Rect
Imagine
Global.
imagine even applying for that. Like, I'd like to. I've got all my paperwork here to apply for Rect Global LLC. Like,
I may be
why is
confusing it
so
actually.
whack?
Hold up.
No, it was Rect. They were the ones that bought it. I think.
Rect Global was. I don't know if they're involved with Sterling or not, so I may be
All right.
incorrect
Whatever.
about that. But like, there was all the problems with Infinite Reality and Rect Global and the payments that when Ibai was like, when they were briefly Mad Lions coy last year, and Ibai was supposedly covering their expenses. So the point is, the bottom though has fallen off out of this organization, and like Rect Global, and they keep changing their names, which is why I'm confused. Like, there's like Infinite Reality was the company that ended up like owning this, but they ended up being so like full of shit as well. So it's just been bounced around like a hot potato. And so this is, it just continues.
By the way,
It
Monty,
continues to be a cloud fiesta.
I'll
basically.
tell you why, Pete. I'll tell you a very simple thing that people, if they follow football, will know what I'm about to reference, right? Which shows you why Riot want Ibai and Carmine Corp in the LEC, right? Do you know how ridiculous streamer culture has gotten now, Monty? That like Ibai, for example, there's a video where like yesterday or something, he was actually like celebrating with the Spanish national football team that just won that cup and holding up the European Championship Cup. He's just a fucking streamer, dude. But like, just because he is a streamer and he is Spanish, he got to like be at that fucking celebration and be doing all that shit with all those like players that just won essentially like the biggest football tournament in the world right now. Like, that's how ridiculous. That's why, unfortunately, esports will always be somewhat tethered to stupid shit like, and here's Tyler One with his take, because as you see in Valorant it's like Shroud and fucking Tarek, in League it's Tyler One. Like, the streamers themselves are bigger than the esport in some ways. That's the problem we have, so we're always just like part of their clown show, unfortunately. Even though, by the way, think how like whack that would be if you actually did take like the biggest real sport in the world and just have like some bozo streamer guy on the broadcast like, what are you doing? That's esports.
I mean,
though
they did put Ninja in a Super Bowl commercial.
That was just a commercial. You could at least turn that off. He did, this equivalent, Monty, would be like if he was just on the halftime show, like, hey, what do you think, Ninja? Who's going to win? I don't know, bro. Whoever gets more touchdowns.
Ninja was on the New Year's Eve countdown in Times Square, which was nationally broadcasted. Like, tens of millions of Americans watch, so it's not that weird. I would say. But yeah, so like, anyway, the point about Rogue is like, they're obviously in dire straits. Their parent company has clearly been having financial issues. So it wouldn't surprise me to sell. And like, I think that it was probably pretty embarrassing for Riot last year to have all that news, and especially potentially have Ibai pull out entirely. Like, it's good for them that he went over to Mad Lions instead, because losing him would mean that the LEC would lose significant amounts of viewership. And this is a guy who just actually like last week set a new record on Twitch and had like 3.5 million concurrent viewers on his stream, which is fucking insane. So losing this guy would have been terrible. And I think, the embarrassing part of this for Rogue and for Riot was that, hey man, he's having to cover these losses that Rogue is facing. So they can't be in a good position. And I imagine that if Riot is forced to choose between Falcons, who are very financially solvent, and Rogue, they're just going to pick Falcons. So I think that transition's probably coming up. Well then, we have no LCS. LCS is going to start soon. So I think we've covered just about everything this week. Any final topics you want to discuss, Thorin?
Why is there still a break for LCS? Why didn't LCS begin straight after EWC?
Well, you see, there's this game called Valorant, and VCT
That's
America
still interrupting. Fucking hell, just never ends.
Well, see, Thorin, when you lay off a bunch of people, and then you have to combine the people who are working on Valorant and League of Legends esports, and Valorant is having VCT America's group stages, and you can't have those people work 7 days a week without paying them ridiculous overtime, then you can't have a broadcast that's going on. And by the way, they had time in the calendar, Thorin, because there's only 8 teams now. It just doesn't take that long to run a single round robin of best of 3s. So you were either going to finish really early, or you were going to start later, or you were going to have a giant 2-week hole in the calendar. But it is starting again. It will be starting again. But yes, that is the reason, if you are curious. It's always the reason, by the way. If you have a question where you say, why is this weird scheduling? By the way, literally exactly the same reason why LEC is going to be on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday of this week. Why is it on Monday and Tuesday? Well, let me tell you, the Valorant calendar.
They keep doing this, and the worst thing about this is they never fucking announce this. Am I the only one? Like, dude, we're hooked into esports, and like, you don't ever see like, when's the big thing? Like, hey, and by the way, watch out, guys, next week it's on the. What even is this?
I mean, the messaging is terrible. It's terrible.
It's mad. It's mad.
But yeah, I mean, that's why. So basically, this coming week, Thorin, we have the 2 lower bracket best of 3s on Sunday, European time. And then we have the Fnatic versus G2 match on Monday. That's a best of 5. And then we have.
By the way, think how mad that is. So literally, guys, in theory, like on paper, the second most important match of the split is the upper bracket final, Fnatic G2. Not only that, it's Fnatic G2. It's your El Clasico. It's literally the one. Like I just gave all that hype before, and you're now going to put it on a different day that you didn't have LEC on before, and it just out of nowhere. Like this is so badly done. This is so stupidly done. It's like you're actually trying to sabotage the fucking viewership, mate. What is this?
Well, but it doesn't matter because summer playoffs aren't where this ends, because we still have the season finals after that, and that's the one that culminates. Because look, I actually that
also just ruins all the narrative. Like you could do it well, but they've set it up so poorly. Like people think it's just a rerun. You know,
I like the LEC's format in general, which I know most people don't, but I like it in general. But the big mistake is having a summer playoff and then a season final right afterwards. You just have to lead the summer, like the summer regular season has to end, and then you just have to have one playoff bracket. Like having 2 makes this first one really meaningless. So I think even they don't care about it, is the answer, Thorin. And when you look at and then what's happening on Tuesday, by the way, is BDS.
I even agree with what you just said. The silliest thing is it's such an easy compromise. All you do, like you just said, is when you qualify, instead of qualifying to, or you could even make it just half a bracket if you want. You have half a bracket. And if you qualify here, like you're into the season finals, and then it just becomes the season finals. You don't have like, you get a championship today, but hold on, because in 3 weeks, someone else wins another one. Like you just take that one out, don't you, Monty? Right. Like you take the other teams from before, so Mad Lions gets to be in no matter what. We get that, but you take out half of it and hook it into the other one. I'm with you.
And maybe you put in bad performing teams and do just a lower bracket automatically. You could do that, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
But I do think this bracket is relatively. It just feels really bad. So I mean, it's kind of whatever. So that's what I think. They've just conceded that it's meaningless and that this part of the format is bad, and so it doesn't matter if they put the winners bracket best of 5, which would normally be a very hype matchup on a Monday, and they change the schedule onto a day where it's not even normally happening. And then Tuesday you have the next 2 lower bracket games, which again is like kind of whatever. But I think what's weird is that then you have to turn around and then do things on the very next week. You're doing things on Friday, like basically like there's no time, right? You literally, because the week after that is Friday, Saturday, Sunday is the schedule. So you end on Tuesday, and then you have the next 3 matches in 3 days, like basically just a few days later. And they're very important matches, including the grand finals, which happens on Sunday. So it feels like the teams won't even be prepared, really. It's not good. Like in some ways, I wouldn't even take a break. I think if I were them, I would rather schedule the matches, Thorin, so it was like just every day up until the finals. Sure, it gives the teams less time to turn it around, but at least like when they start, they're just on every day at that time, instead of having a random ass break. And they're being on weird days and then a break and then like a 2-day break and then them being back on again. So very strange. Very strange. But again, I don't think it really matters. The season finals are what matters. We don't really know when those start yet, but I think that's what most people are going to care about, not
so here's another thing,
really
Monty.
Random playoff bracket.
If you're going to make it like the season, then make the season finals a roadshow. You know what I mean? Like make it some fucking super epic shit. Is the whole thing there though?
No, not the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. It still says, like, if you go to season finals it just says Germany. Just takes
It's in
place in
Munich.
Germany.
It's in Munich. But also, like, they didn't go very far. They announced it was going to be in Munich earlier this year. But again, it's like, it's the same shit. Like, they announced that LCS finals are going to be, summer finals are going to be in Los Angeles. And now, like, they don't even leave the country of Germany in order to do another final. So it does feel
Just think
rather...
how much League of Legends fucking sucks as an esports, bro. That if you're Caps, you basically have probably played, Monty, less real stadium finals than like some great Counter-Strike player played in a single year of their career.
Yep.
And he's been in as many as you can possibly be in from the West. Like that, like most of his like domestic championships are just in a stupid studio or like a the equivalent of a blast finals, which we even joke in CS, by the way, is a banana cup and we don't consider it real compared to Cologne and Katowice. Like, where the fuck is the Katowice and Cologne of League of Legends? What are we doing right now? You have to basically be in Worlds finals to experience that. That's whack. That's just whack, bro. One of the best things about CS is like you have to be like mega battle tested to be a champion because you're always going to be in like a stadium with like 10,000 fans. You're going to be in different countries. Like it's like it doesn't just test the game skill; it tests all the other qualities too. So I think it's just whack. I think it's just going to end up sad.
Well, not only that, but as we've discussed before on this show, and it's relevant again because tickets just went on sale. World's tickets went on sale this week. And again, groups like Swiss Stage is going to be in the LEC studio. So both play-ins and Swiss Stage are going to be in the LEC studio. And there's going to be very, very few seats available for that. Probably most of those seats will just be taken up by Riot employees and the players and the teams and their families. So like, how many public tickets are realistically going to be available? So no one's actually going to be able to see, 90% of the, not 90%, maybe 50% of the matches that are played at Worlds. And then for quarters and semis, they go to Paris, and then they go to London for the World Final.
I've just Googled it, right? At the official state funeral of Ronald Reagan, the US president, around 4,000 people were gathered at the cathedral. Bro, if we can't even have more than the fucking funeral of Ronald Reagan for LEC finals, or whole region, by the way, not even just Europe anymore, Monty, Middle East, Africa, and Europe. That's like 2.5 continents right there, sort of. We can't even have more than watched old fucking Ronald Reagan, like, see you, mate, you're dead, see you. Like, there's the lines, the Ronald Reagan line. Until you get over the Ronald Reagan Rubicon, right, I don't care about your esports events.
To be fair, Ronald Reagan was also a movie star, so he kind of had the double dip of fame, But yeah, it's not great. And
there's probably at this point there's more people have seen like a fucking snuff film in Hollywood than will see a live LEC final in their lifetime. There you go. That's the fucking other Rubicon for you.
More people have seen the Jeffrey Epstein tapes than
At this point, yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, any other topics you want to discuss, or shall we do some viewer questions? All right, guys, we will take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll do some viewer questions. See you then.
Right, we're going to do the viewer questions portion of the show now. If you want to support us and gain access to the perk of inquiring about a particular topic in our viewer questions channel, you get access by subscribing to our Discord, the Last Free Nation Discord, and there's a channel there. It'll be called like SI questions or something. You just post your question there, and if it is good, Monty will pick it.
Or we just do all of them, you know. That's been good recently.
So how the week's going?
A while ago, you leaked some funny behind-the-scenes stories from LoL esports without naming any names, e.g. the dick pic before LCS games. Got any more to share? Got any more just random stories to share?
All right, I'll tell you one. You'll know this reference. There was a really great Korean player who in the early days of League was one of the biggest stars and names, and basically let's just say he like washed out the Korean scene pretty quickly within a year or two. And one of the reasons it was inferred why was he basically just had some like nightmare relationship with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend just like dominated him completely and like made him spend all his time with her, and he could never like have social life, and basically it was just practice the game. And then I think it was even one of those ones where, because it was early in esports, she was like pressuring him to like give up the game for her. It was one of those like mind game things. So I won't say the name, but there's players like that where, you know, from the outside you're sort of like, what happened to that guy? And it's like, well, there's a reason, but we can't tell you officially.
Yeah, exactly.
These stories. You know, there's sometimes stories like that. You know,
not in League, but I can say that in a different esports, the inexplicably bad performance of a team I knew was being basically caused by a player's girlfriend like threatening to kill herself and like holding the player hostage. That was really bad. So, you know, sometimes when you see random fall offs or weird things happen, like a lot of times we just have to sit there and be like, I have no idea why this is going on. And if it feels like we're being too nice to them, maybe there's a reason sometimes, you know, if it feels like we're making a few too many excuses for a team. Sometimes that's because we know things.
I've got another one for you. Okay. In the Korean esports scene, so StarCraft, League, the big games, it was mainly more the StarCraft era, because back then the actual work culture was insane. I mean, if people don't know, they still say this in some of the League teams, I notice, right? The famous concept back in the day under Kesper was that it actually was mandated. They used to say that you were supposed to practice 12 hours a day. That was the like baseline level. So what it would be is normal players practice 12 hours a day. Then if you're in StarCraft like Bisu or Flash, or in League you're like Mata or some like Legendary, you do like your 12 hours and then you just do 4 hours of solo queue as well. Now anyone who knows basic maths understands 12 plus 4 is 16. Well, at that point, even if you went to sleep instantly and slept all 8 hours, which you're not going to, you're only going to get the basic amount of sleep and just work all day long. So already you can tell the work-life balance was really out of whack. And if you go back to the StarCraft era in the 2000s, even though like the game was big on television, an actual player is a mega nerd back then. Like I could believe now, because of how like media's merged with esports, in theory, if Faker goes to like, you know, he could go to like a movie opening if he wanted or something more. He could look suave. He could appear like just an athlete, essentially. He could have the respect of a successful athlete. Back then, even when you were the best players, you still were like a really awkward nerd, and you were never at some movie fucking premiere. You were never at a mixer with celebrities. You were just a weird nerd off in a room practicing, and it's just your image was used on TV. I can tell you, Monty, it was a notorious secret within the industry back then. Not that, I'm not saying secret like all the Westerners know, but people who know Korean esports know this, that one of the things some of those team owners and managers used to do to let off steam is just take their star players to literal bathhouse prostitute brothels and just at a minimum get them like jerked off, if not just have sex with a prostitute. And this, by the way, was treated like sort of almost like, this is what's fucked up, Monty. The way it was actually treated and described was almost like some insane shit of like how you like breed horses or something, you know, where it's like, well, we've got to get like this, you got to get, you know, we've got to get his rocks off or whatever, you know, he's too, this horse is too like agitated. We've got to like calm him down. They were almost doing it as like a prescriptive behavior. Like, hey, listen, my guy's like been grinding too hard. I've got to, you know, fucking, let's take the harsh edges off this, you know, let's calm him down a little bit because it was almost treated like they just do that for you so that you have some element of socialization. So it might sound mad, but put it this way, it's why back in the day, this is a famous drama people might know. One time when I had a beef with Hock, the legendary StarCraft 2 player from Canada, I did once make a very rude comment where, because he'd been in Korea for a long time, I made a joke that the only time in the last few years he'd performed against a Korean, because I was obviously inferring that, was in one of those bathhouses. And all I can tell you is that's why he didn't just get mad at me, he actually got really mad at me, because I was also doing that naughty thing where I clearly was kind of poking at a thing where the public wouldn't know what I'm referring to, but like everyone sort of knew what I was referencing, and I was almost implying like I'm going to tug on the, you know, the thread on the fucking sweater and make it all unravel, Monty. So I purposely didn't put any names in there. By the way, I'm not even in fire. I know Hook did it. That was just a joke angle, but that was that. Put it this way, you've heard those stories, but that was like way more famous than people would realize.
Well, it's also just not surprising because you know, prostitution is rampant in Korea, and like they pretend that it doesn't exist, but it's literally fucking everywhere. So yeah, it's not surprising.
They just do that weird thing, don't they, where like people, especially businessmen, know it's a thing and know who's doing it, but you just don't ever address it. It's just just goes like you pretend it doesn't exist at all.
That's how Korean
It's just
society
not
works.
about.
Is like it's illegal, but everybody does it. Everybody knows everybody does it, and it's everywhere.
Dude, the craziest for me was when I actually did go for my first holiday to Busan. I went to the beach place, and I remember the girl I was with saying, I was like, what is that? And they literally had like a red light district. It was like this light was on this bottom floor thing. That's basically what it is. And I was like, but we're right next to the beaches in the open. And that's what she said. She said, yeah, but that's the point. No one addresses it. You just pretend it doesn't exist. So you do know it, but you just pretend it doesn't. You know, it's just not talked about is the idea. Which, by the way, to be fair, is actually an idea from like British culture. And that is the idea of like certain things aren't to be talked about in public. It's not becoming to discuss certain topics, right? You leave that out. So fair enough. Just interesting. But this way, the reason I bring that story up, Monty, is if you know like legendary StarCraft 2 and League of Legends players, some of your favorite players have indulged in this behavior. As in their culture, it's not as crazy, by the way. They have again, they have more of sort of a sort of mental distinction where it's not, to them, it's not as much of a scandal as if you heard some Western player had done this, you know. It really isn't.
Well, it is a scandal. It is a scandal if it comes out publicly, because then it's shameful. But you know, it's like one of those things that doesn't usually.
Yeah.
I have a question for each of you. Monty, you nailed the prediction of the Americas merger, but isn't it the perfect time for the LCS and LEC to merge and throw it in Saudi Arabia? I mean, yes, is the answer. Like, if I'm being just purely practical about it, yeah, absolutely. From a business perspective, I think that's absolutely the play you should make. You know, I don't see you know, especially with the way that the Saudi Arabian government is creating this Qiddiya district, and they're trying to have the teams headquartered there, and a bunch of the NA and the LCS and LEC teams are already partners. Like, yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. I'm sure the Saudi government would love nothing more than for that to happen. And purely from a business perspective, Riot offloading those costs would be a good idea. And frankly, purely from an entertainment perspective of us having those teams competing against each other regularly would be very fun. So, yes.
My metaphor would be this, right? The only thing that can save the league circuit is the Super League, Monty. So you make the Super League, you get all the biggest teams together. Finally, you don't have to sell out to the Saudis. But then all of a sudden, in comes the mystery investor via a hedge fund, an investment group that actually allowed you to make the super team. He pulls off the mask. It is MBS. It was MBS all along. You could never avoid the Saudi money. It was always out there. It was just getting its way into all the pockets and all the nooks and crannies. Eventually, you also won't be able to escape it for that reason. That's the other thing people haven't thought through. It's like, by the way, we're making fun of the Falcons thing. Why can't that happen in the West, by the way? Why can't they just be like silent partners or people who invest without making it public into like Cloud9 and Team Liquid? And eventually, by the way, if they do that angle as well, people also will stop talking and being bothered about these things.
Weird,
gradually peel back.
It's almost like if it was just a good financial investment, they would just make the investment and then reap the rewards later on instead of making it a big PR deal. It's weird that they, you know, it just kind of betrays the whole game plan, because like they don't have to make it a big PR deal, especially if people are literally not going to join Falcons because of the fact they're a Saudi Arabian team. You would think, well, let's just hide the money. But it's not about that, guys. It's about losing money for PR. It always has been. It will continue to be so.
All right, we're just going to go over now to our live Saudi sports washing correspondent, Jacob Wolf, who will give us the update on, in fact, whether or not this is sports washing or not. What's that? Yeah, I'm going to send this. Right, anyway. And then his follow-up tweet says, and this Black Forest Gato isn't going to eat itself. Because for whatever reason, I didn't make him do that. He does do tweets like that. He does just mad ones where it'll just be like, anyway, this giant thing of barbecue ain't going to eat itself. Like, well, I guess it certainly isn't, Jacob. You're right on that one. Anyway. Back to
Thorin. I still contend Thorin versus Frankie is one of the best pieces of content on the internet. She's unfortunately just a microcosm of everything wrong with the media, social media, and virtue signaling. True. Did you hear any sort of feedback from anyone in the industry about that video?
Well, the joke is the only time anyone ever brings it up is to say privately, like, what a fucking amazing video. I loved that. In fact, some of the people who've told me they really loved it were people I don't even think had an issue with Frankie. Some of them weren't even people I'd consider, like, you know, toxic or like some of them. I think what people enjoyed is, like you're saying, people just enjoyed that she was almost like a microcosm of the annoying, woke, scold, hypocrite person who never had any points and was just here to be annoying. And I just comprehensively take her down using her own words. But you have to realize people like Frankie in their own mind are impossible to defeat, because she then pivoted in the classic female style, by the way, to the logic then became, because by pointing out she's a hypocrite, I'm hurting her feelings, I'm the bad guy again and she's the victim. So you can never beat someone like that, mate. You'll never beat them. They always have that get out, so you can't get past that.
That's because, I mean, just in general, that's what people do, is they have prioritized the way they feel about things, and that's what matters, right? It doesn't matter what the reality of something is. It doesn't matter the truth of words. It doesn't matter the logic. It's like, if it makes me feel bad, it is bad. So
basically, yeah.
What is the most BM thing a LoL player can do inside the server and outside the server? I don't know what they could do inside BM thing that they could do inside of the server.
I would say, in theory, inside the server, isn't it? Surely, if you like intentionally blow your flash or something, you know what I mean? Like something that sort of says "fuck you" in the game.
If you're like Zach ulting with Zonias in their fountain and you flash in there, that's pretty BM. I love it.
If you do like a fucking package onto the fountain and die, Larson, shout out. You know, if you do that, that sort of moves pretty BM too. I'm with you.
Rip package deleted from the game forever. But yes, that kind of stuff. Outside of the server, I mean, it could be anything, so it's kind of vague. Without stating hard numbers, could you break down the sources of revenues for the last Free Nation as well as the percentages? No. Are there plans for diversification? And what do you...
You know when people do that thing where they go, thing about our companies, we're really committed to transparency. We aren't. By the way, it is none of your fucking business how we scramble and are able to do all these shows, which we give you for free. So you know what? Unless you want to actually invest in our company, you don't get to know it. Look, you can ask, but we're not going to give you any of that info.
Right.
I'm not even interested in you having that info either.
I will say, like, the majority of our sponsorship, the money comes from sponsorships, right? That's where the majority. So it's like, I would say, I will break it down in terms of tier list for you. By far the biggest is sponsorships. The second one is like YouTube ad revenue, and the third one is like Discord subscriptions or like direct payments. You know, so you guys are great, and we love answering your questions, and thank you for your support. But it is a very small part of the revenue of the company. And like, that's the whole point, guys, is we want to continue to give you free content. We're going to give you bonus stuff if you are a Discord subscriber like this. But, you know, what we want is for the majority of the revenue to be coming from sponsors. Are there plans for diversification? Yes. Obviously, like, merchandise is something we want to get into eventually. Maybe some other products. Who knows if we can get those like developed in-house? That might be interesting. So yeah, I think there is we're figuring it out as we go along. But right now, I think most of the diversification is just going to come in terms of content. Like, we'd love to get involved in more in esports. We'd love to get involved in general gaming. We'd love to do some more stuff on the culture channel. We'd love to do some more stuff on the sports channel. Like, these are all things in terms of diversification that we'd like to get into. But I mean, the podcast revenue business is good for us, and the more podcasts and the more viewership we have, if we can continue to do that, the more we can bring in via revenue from our sponsors. So yep, that's basically it. A great question here from Butt Pounder 420. Is Destiny the final boss of the manlets? It's a good way to pose it. I mean, I really dislike that guy, so I just think he's an idiot and a fraud. And also, I don't know if you saw this, Thorin, but I was wondering, like, what happened to his kid? Because his kid just disappeared when he started dating, like, that 20-year-old Swedish girl who was, like, cucking him with another guy even after they were married or whatever. And I saw a post, like, of somebody who is allegedly his son on his Discord saying that they had learned more about their dad from like Wikipedia than from him being in their life, which like I just have no if that's true. And I don't know if
I mean,
it's
I
true,
hadn't
guys.
thought about it, but to be fair, I guess his kid must be like a teenager
10?
now, like logically. Yeah, because I guess it's been so long, right? It's been like over 10 years of streaming and shit. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So
okay,
like,
I never thought about it. Okay.
I mean, I will say, like, as somebody who has kids, like the thought of abandoning my kids for like a streaming career, like I don't know what happened to Carlos's kids, like G2 Carlos's kid as well. Like that.
I mean, as far as I know, he lives in another country with his mother. Though. That's the problem, right? Doesn't the mother live in France and he lives in Dubai or something? So I don't know how you do that one.
I mean, just saying, like, it's very weird to me that both of these guys have like completely spun off from their families and like the responsibility of like raising these kids. I'm sure Destiny pays some money, but it is weird that he's off like gallivanting with these young women and marrying them and then divorcing them, and then his kid is just like left out there. I don't know. Maybe it's not true. Maybe that was fake news, but I did see that circulating around. What do you think about Destiny? Is he the final boss of the Vandals?
Is I just don't get what the gimmick is. Like, I don't even get what is the hook that makes people interested? Like, if it's like, oh, but he's debating people. Like, I can find a bazillion people doing debates online about every topic. So I don't get that angle. And then also, to me, the interest in Destiny comes from the early days of StarCraft 2, when most pro players were very boring and had no personality. And this was someone who, funnily enough, as exactly the persona he portrayed at the time, would be literally the person he would now say should be cancelled and probably have no job, was known to be like, essentially, he was like StarCraft 2 good. He was an edgy guy with like a big person. I wouldn't even say great, but a big personality who you wanted to see like interact with the stuffed shirts. You wanted to see him interact with the EG players who were overpaid, and we all knew it. You wanted to see him argue with people in the scene, because crucially, in fact, it's a little bit like what I was able to do in my career, because he didn't have to only be a pro or only be on broadcast. He could always take it or leave it. That means he was one of the few people who could say it how it is, as it were, or say what the others couldn't. So to me, that was the whole appeal. That's why back then I was involved with him and did content with him, etc. The problem I have is when it comes to politics / just every topic in the world that isn't about esports, again, I'll just say the same thing. What's the hook? Like, to me, it's a bit like the reason why, Monty, I don't listen to pop music isn't that no pop music is good. It's just that, like, in the modern day, being as I'm not like confronted by pop music everywhere in life, there's already too much music that's great I'm never going to get to, you know, like I'd rather go and check out some other shit of like the Moody Blues that I never got to from the 80s or something, you know, like, so it's the same concept. Like, there'll never be a spare hour in my life where I'll go, what's Destiny up to? So I just don't get the hook, really. I would actually spin it the other way and ask, what do you guys like about that shit? I don't get what's so appealing to you all. Even the idea of like, but he's arguing and they're getting mad. It's like, isn't trolling culture ubiquitous online? Like, is that even a unique selling point? You know what I mean?
I did see some weird YouTube comments the last time I like talked about Destiny in one of these comments. People were like, Monty, you know, Destiny's really quite different now. I'm like, motherfucker, I know Destiny personally. Like, I just don't like him. Like, I know him. I'm allowed to just fucking dislike him, dislike the way he's approached me, dislike the way he's treated me. I don't give a fuck if he's changed. I still don't like him.
Oh, there's a massive parasocial element also, it seems like. Yeah, true. He's like our guy or some shit.
Yeah, whatever. You guys fucking watch that garbage. I don't want to watch it. I think he's a moron. I know he's a moron because I know him, unlike you. The LoL Esports World Cup was 4 days. Meanwhile, the Dota Esports World Cup is 17 days, with play-ins followed by groups, followed by double elimination. You've already speculated as to why LoL was short, easier for ESL to look good for starters. But who do you think the decision came from? Was it ESL or Riot? Well, it was Riot, because they said, we're on vacation this week. The leagues aren't running. You have a week to do this. That I promise you that's where it came from. And with that said, knowing what Riot did to Valve games, like basically implying like they had to separate like the brand of Dota into the ESL 1 as opposed to IEM back in the day, because Riot didn't want Dota at like Katowice, so they had to make the whole other thing and the whole other brand. Do you think there's a chance they block CS2, Dota, or both from future iterations of the Esports World Cup? No.
No.
They don't have the power to do that.
Also, notice, Monty, the difference in the dynamic there is who has the power and who wants to work with who. ESL wanted to work with Riot, so ESL had to do what Riot wanted.
Yep.
In this analogy, even though they'll present it the other way around, Riot would be the one who want to work with the Saudis, so they're just going to take their terms, I imagine.
Yep.
That'll be my guess.
Next question. Southgate out? Well, Southgate is out, as I understand
He's
it.
already
right?
out, yeah.
He's already out.
But this was probably submitted a few days ago. It was only like yesterday or something like that news came out. Yeah.
So basically, I guess I'll change this question because I don't know all about this. What do you think the future of the English national team is? Because you have the World Cup coming in a couple of years.
Right. The main problem is obviously the question, like all roster moves, well, who's replacing them? Right. So the issue becomes if it's someone themselves who isn't very famous or very good, then maybe it's not that great a move. But put it this way, there was already a news article today where it was speculated that maybe they'll even hire like a stopgap manager. And then what they'll try and do is at the end of next year, Pep Guardiola, who's the manager of Man City and is probably considered the greatest coach of all time, maybe they can get him to be the England manager. So, by the way, I actually think that would basically be the dream scenario. Because if anyone saw some of his own players like Phil Foden, who look way worse not in his system, I imagine if he just implemented his system, those players would look awesome.
If he's
so the real
great,
problem
why
with
wasn't
this,
he hired originally for this job?
he didn't want to do it. He might coach as one of the best teams in the world. The problem with that gig is like, even though this is why football is a stupid sport, Monty, because every fan will tell you the World Cup is the most important tournament, but by every metric, it isn't. Like, that's not what defines your whole career. Like, your career is like trying to win like your league and the Champions League every year. Like, at the end of the day, it's a club sport that happens to have a very popular international side to it.
I hate the national side of it. I think it's.
But people make it seem like the international is be all end all. So the problem there is, I imagine like beggars can't be choosers. Like the reason why the Gareth Southgate one was so stupid was he wasn't some legendary manager, by the way. He used to be an England player himself as a player like 20, 30 years ago. And then in the meantime, as a manager, he wasn't even that successful. He was like a not very good manager of Middlesbrough, which was like my local team in the Northeast. So I never even understood that appointment in the first place. So the key thing I would say is this. The reason that topic has been infuriating of like, should they replace the manager is because people are doing the worst example of single factor analysis you'll ever see. What they're doing is, if you look at the raw placings of where England is placed, he's probably the best manager ever in the history of the country because he made it to like 2 finals for the Euros. He made it to the semi-final of a World Cup, and his other result was the quarter-final of a World Cup. On paper, right? That's awesome, isn't it, Monty? But here's the problem. What if I told you they had the roster to win those tournaments? Well, all of a sudden, that's actually failure. So what people can't understand is this, Monty. When they say that line, but if you look at the results, he's the best manager ever. The other managers didn't have these players. Like the guy in 1990 didn't have this exact lineup. The guy in 2006 didn't have this exact lineup. So the real issue is, as anyone who watched this tournament will see, England made it to the final through a mixture of, he has the most insane bracket draws ever. He just gets all the bad brackets somehow of like shit teams. And then every time they play a real team, they almost always lose. The only 2 teams we've ever beaten is Germany and fucking Netherlands, and those were 2 of their worst iterations of that squad. And then lastly, like I say, on paper, if your roster is like top 2 or 3 every time, then eventually getting 0 trophies is actually failure relative to the potential you had. So essentially, to answer it all, I just hope somehow they can sort of get to a real manager like Pep Guardiola, that or Mourinho or something. That would be the dream for me. I think if that happened, it'd be fucking amazing, because the actual pieces they have now, I actually think people got one step too far on the narrative. This Euros, they could listen. England's roster could have won, but no one yet has figured it out. And actually, some of the players in this midfield that they're all complaining about are really young. Like one of them's 20, one of them's like 22, one of them's 24. Well, that means that in 2 years at the World Cup, they will have finally like gotten to boiling point, guys. In the World Cup's actually when England could have, in theory, its best roster ever in history. So I personally, no matter, even though I don't know who the manager will be, I'm actually glad it'll be a different manager, because I think whoever they are has a real chance to actually win the World Cup. So I think that's amazing. I think it's good news all around generally. And also the other thing finally to say is this: the worst thing about the Gareth Southgate guys, not only was the team like kind of a bit lucky, not as good as Schumer, but they also had a very boring style of play. Like anyone who watched it will know, it's literally not a joke. The fucking strikers sometimes passed the ball back to the goalkeeper. The striker, as in they were in the attacking third of the field and they passed the ball all the way back to the goalkeeper. That's the opposite of the sport I grew up watching. Like that guy, a striker only goes forwards for fuck's sake. So it also was not a good product to watch, sadly, even though it was exciting to see them go far and all that jazz, you know. So anyway, I'll probably do like a side channel video on that one day. It's all good.
Very good. If you could permanently ban any LoL champion from any role, but they could still be picked in other roles, what would you pick and where?
It's got to be some of the stuff that ruins jungle, right? It's got to be like the shit where it's like, the stuff that just gets way too OP. Like probably stuff like Karthus or something. You know what I mean? Like maybe that shouldn't be in jungle, if you know what I mean.
I think for me, it's like really boring tanks in top lane. Like keep that shit in the jungle. Like, can I ban Europe from playing fucking Sejuani in top lane, please? Like, can we stop that? That shit is horrible. It's horrible to watch. Some of the tanks in top lane are pretty egregious, I think.
I mean, if you want to be evil, just ban all ADCs from support, just so T1 can never win again. So just do that if you want. Just get rid of that forever.
I'd like to ban Varus from mid lane. That's another recent one that I could definitely do without. I mean, AD carries in mid lane are pretty terrible right now, but I think Varus is the stupidest one. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to change this question a little bit. On a scale of 1 to 10, how crazy is it that talent like Nymera and Trouble Inc. are not casting in the LEC? I mean, Jamada kind of got screwed too. Like, I don't understand the LEC talent stuff. It's like they bring in Nymera and Trouble, and then they just banish them to the phantom zone of the LPL forevermore, right? Like, they're really good. I've been listening to a lot of Trouble's cast, obviously Nymera too, but recently Trouble's been doing a lot more LPL casting. She's really good, I think, in the matches that I review. Like, I think she's on point with her commentary. Like, I think she's entertaining. I don't really understand how they make the talent selections that they do on the LEC broadcast, because it feels like they bring in up and coming people. The people are good and getting better, and then they just go away magically.
And think how many years, like Trouble especially, has been trying. Dude, hasn't she been doing LEC for like 3 years now or something? Like, it's a long time to never just get like the full-time call-up. And I agree with you. You're just giving her way to a better league. Now she's on the LPL. Okay. Doesn't help her career, but
I mean, the problem
is
good
for us, I guess.
The LPL is like, not good for actual casters like trying to make a living, right? But it's just very weird that they bring them on for a little bit and then they just get rid of them entirely. I don't really understand why they're doing that or what the decisions that are being made are. And like Jamada his role has been reduced as well, and I think he's been good, so I don't get it.
I mean, as a more literal answer, I can just tell you that from all the stories I've heard over the years, the saddest thing about stuff like LCS and LEC is they're actually bottlenecked and gatekept by people you will never know the name of, who are just like talent managers and stuff, and people who do the hiring. But not only will you never know their name, they have no accountability. Now, look, when I say that, they should, like, again, this is not like I said with that answer about our finances. Riot doesn't owe us any transparency. They don't have to tell us why they hire anyone. But I'm just saying, like, the reason I say no accountability is if those people are just being arseholes and they don't like you, they can absolutely get away with just not hiring you. They'll never have any blowback for that.
And these people are like little goblins too. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, they should not be having this power over the broadcast. And they are like, they're just little petty, tyrants, little goblins, and they exist, and they should not have these powers, and they should not, these are like very, like, a lot of these people come from like, streamer agencies and shit like this. Like, they suck is basically it. They have no
always people where you never recognize the name when you hear it first. You're like, who? And then someone made the way through the industry.
Either, by the way. So like it really is a lot about like how much they like you and how much you suck up to them. And it's very weird that they're given these powers on the domestic leagues. It's very weird.
Yeah, agreed.
Whether people agree with his takes or not, LS has had a huge effect on the language and vocabulary of LoL. Yes. In this context, who are the LSs of other games or of other disciplines?
Why the disclaimer though? Why did it have to have, whether you agree with this? Just LS has had a great influence on LoL. Why do we have to put that disclaimer in like we all secretly hate him? I think he's brilliant.
Who are the LSs of other games or of other disciplines?
Got some bad news for you, mate. He's called Thorin. Like, you know what's hilarious in CS, Monty, is everyone uses all of my language from my early YouTube videos 10 years ago. Like, when they talk about a CS team and you model it as you have your two main stars and then the third player's either your third star, who's trying to be like you're trying to have a super team, or you're trying to have like a more of a defensive element. When you talk about like how they set up the roles and who gets what attention, because a lot of it I took from things like how Dota Farm structures their team and these concepts, right? Loads of that stuff that I put in back in the day, people just still use to this day. But the problem problem is, like, I've essentially, I have the same problem Freud has, Monty. Every moron only remembers the takes I have they didn't like and goes, you knew nothing. And then they go, of course, you never had any good points. And then they use all my terminology and all my concepts. Like, be like, that Freud didn't know anything. I think his problem was he had something like a complex, like his id and his super. It's like, he's just using this shit now. You're using his shit. You don't know you are a fish in water and he made the water. So on some level, I do that a bit in CS, I would say. I'm not sure about other games. Maybe Artosis or something in StarCraft
for
or something
sure,
like that.
Yeah, Artosis for sure in StarCraft. I mean, I did in League too. Like a lot of my language around drafting and team
rotations
fights,
and
like
all that.
Rotations, win conditions.
Win conditions.
Yeah, all this shit is still used. What about other games though? I would say Artosis definitely has very deeply affected the language of StarCraft. I mean, any other like non-game I mean, Freud is an excellent one in the field of psychology, right? Harold Bloom in terms of literary criticism. Let's move on. If you had to make a prediction now, what do you think is the most likely scenario for how and when the end of League of Legends as a major esport will occur? And what are the major causes and effects related?
I mean, that's where the whole Saudi angle just is like the ultimate wild card that just makes it impossible to predict, right? They could, if they wanted, they could just run it forever, essentially. Yes. Right? Could just go forever.
They could just run it forever. You could create the Super League. I do think that consolidation, like we've already seen massive consolidation in League of Legends. Remember, we went from all of these independent leagues all over the world, LLA, CBLOL, the Turkish league, leagues everywhere, minor leagues. And now like the Turkish league is now like rolled in with the European tier 2 system. They're consolidating, we don't even have like independent leagues of LJL and OPL and, PCS anymore. It's all being rolled together into Oceania. Like they killed the OPL entirely. We used to have an entire Taiwanese league for many years. That doesn't exist anymore. It's now part of it's been, so they've been slowly consolidating, and obviously over time they're going to consolidate more, and it's probably going to consolidate in Asia. Because the Chinese are still playing fucking professional Warcraft 3. The Koreans are still playing professional Brood War. They will play League of Legends for a very long time. Will the West play it? Maybe not. But I mean, the death of this is unless they do something to fix the barrier to entry of the game, you're just not going to have younger esports fans anymore. I mean, sure, Brood War is propped up by a bunch of like Gen X people in Korea, like it's a bunch of 40, 50-year-olds that are watching the game because they were watching this in the late 90s when they were young.
Of course. Yeah.
So like that's what's perpetuating Brood War in Korea.
The Brood War leagues are basically like X-Men 97. Like it's like cynically marketed to a very particular demographic. Exactly.
And yeah.
Basically. By the way, I've got a funny side thing for you, which is I saw on the subreddit while you were talking there, right, that there's an interview just got released on esports.gg. So that's a site that bought like classic scam fucking URL that everyone normally does dodgy stuff. But they're obviously trying to do coverage, right? This headline, what a fucking amazing headline they picked for Reddit. Because remember, the context is this is Fnatic humanoid. Say that. So think about Fnatic and how you've seen them draft from this quote. This is amazing. He goes, about the Fearless draft, he goes, I think one bad thing about Fearless is that draft matters a lot more. I don't like when you go into a game and you know you have a really bad draft. I would like the game to be mostly about how you play it out instead of how you pick your champions. Yeah, I'm thinking that if I was in Fnatic too, mate, because their drafting is a fucking nightmare. Holy shit. I actually love how hilarious, like how lacking in self-awareness that statement is. It's so good. Because the joke is if you're in G2, you don't have a problem with drafting, do you? You fucking love drafting. What are you talking about? I love it. I love
throwing your coach under the bus. And also, like,
it's great.
The way to respond to humanoid is, I too would like you to play better in the server with the champions that you have.
Exactly. I love it. I love it. It's so on point.
So basically, I think it's not going to die anytime soon. Like die. It just becomes a zombie esport after a certain number of years.
Exactly.
And like, unless the thing about Counter-Strike, guys, is Counter-Strike has been continuously able over 20 years to refresh its player base with younger players because it's very accessible. And sometimes like the regions change. Like I think you probably say, Thorin, like a lot of the new players are coming out of CIS, right, these days. So it's like a different young player base, but there's been like new wells of talent, and like those are just drying up everywhere. Like you saw even Arnold Her, the CEO of Gen G, tweet like, we don't even have young Korean players anymore coming into the amateur scene. So they need to fix the barrier to entry. This game can't have 170 different fucking champions, guys. That's insane. What is your favorite League of Legends bug? My favorite bug of all time was when they released the robot Amumu skin. If you pressed Control 4 to laugh, it would globally laugh. So basically, in the game, all the players would hear the robot Amumu laugh, even from Fog of War. That one was just funny.
I don't know.
It's fine.
What would be my favorite bug? I mean, the joke is, if I'm going to be mean, I should just pick one of the ones that was actually affecting pro player. Like, wasn't there that what? Like, there's actually been some bug. That there's been some that have lasted like years, Monty. Like, I think there was one, wasn't there one where like Aatrox used to just like randomly just like fucking get like extra health for no reason and just like be fucking unkillable. There's been some mad ones like that over the years that are just like, how is this in pro play? For fuck's sake.
George R. R. Martin, A Dance with Dragons, released in 2011. Maybe we can get some Thorin rant about lazy bastard George R. R. Martin. He just doesn't know how to end things, guys.
I think he implied that the next book, the winter one or whatever, comes out soon. It's like supposed to be like next year or something. Wasn't it implied it was coming out soon? Something like that. I don't know.
I mean, the
problem I have is this, Monty. I do think at this point in time, like, that guy basically has every possible incentive. He has like unlimited money. Yes. Everyone wants to see it. It could be movies. So at this point in time, I actually do align with like a popular fan theory that I actually think he is scared to end the series, Monty.
Yes.
I think he just knows that he won't stick the landing. Yeah. And by the way, I think he's especially traumatized by what happened with the TV show reception, that everyone hated it. So I think he's going to hold out as long as possible, mate, and not do it if possible.
And especially because if the ending of the TV series, like, obviously it was rushed, but I assumed like he told the showrunners that's what he wanted, at least the broad strokes.
Everyone's hoping that he just gave extremely vague things. It's not like that, because if it's all like that, obviously everyone's going to hate it, right?
Yes. I think he's in a corner is what I think, and he can't get out of it. And also he doesn't have a reason to get out of it, because what's the point? He's already old and rich and can live the rest of his life, and who gives a fuck? You know what I mean?
Also, the other thing I don't think people realize, Monty, is this is where actually, if you've ever seen that famous YouTube channel called Alt-Shift-X, it actually became famous for doing breakdowns of Game of Thrones. They would take each episode, and what happens is the guy who does the channel, some like Australian guy, he has like, essentially, he's like a mega nerd for the books. So he's like read all the books and all the like expanded universe type shit, right? And basically, if you ever watch those videos or just read the books yourself, what you'll realize is the other problem George R. R. Martin has is the TV show is essentially the equivalent of the kiddies pool, and his book is the deep end of the diving pool. Like, the problem is, in his book, he set up some enormous storylines. Like, if you think even the Song of Ice and Fire is big, there's way bigger ones. Like, if you've never read it, the whole theory about what that like three-eyed raven guy was into is like mental. It's the idea that they hinted at in that last season, Monty, where they would show that like Bran was having visions of like, like the Mad King who was like killing the Starks. Yet the whole premise that they were hinting at, that's it, one of the potential themes he hasn't yet fully unpacked in the books, is the idea that like three-eyed raven guy was essentially like sort of like almost like traveling through the timeline with like his consciousness or something, affecting all things. So, and he was the one whispering in the Mad King's ear. And he was essentially like the whole, like, essentially, like, it's one of the most ambitious like subplots under the surface I've ever seen. So I actually don't even know how you would pull that off, mate, because again, in the TV show, remember in the TV show, they abandoned the actual Song of Ice and Fire even, and they just made it like, it was just Jon Snow, and like, like they were trying to make it all, what, like, for example, in the TV show, what was going on with Stannis, like they were building him up, and then notice they also, another thing that's nightmare about the TV show is they repeatedly, Monty, through that Fire Witch and then through that like guy who got resurrected, showed you that magic is real and actually exists in the world, but then it had no impact on the rest of the series. That is mental, mate. So I actually think the show itself essentially highlights the problems with how complex he made the story. And so I don't know in the book how you're ever going to resolve this shit. Like, I think you have to be like a giga genius to tie all these threads in and make it really satisfying. And his whole style throughout the series has been, he never gives you a satisfying moment. It's always like subversion. So I agree with you. He's absolutely painted into a corner, which is sad because I actually think some of those storylines I alluded to, but like the thread sounded really interesting, but they're never going to be played out, it feels like.
Well, I haven't read the books, but it probably sounds like it's better unresolved, Thorin, because at least your imagination, you're still interested in them instead of like a very disappointing conclusion. Okay, next. On Hot Take Point Made, Kassad had a hilarious analogy. For Thorin, if you are in a stranger's house, it's dark, and it turns out the stranger is Mark Merrill. How many ex-Riot bodies do you trip over in Kassad's analogy? What analogy was this on Hot Take Point Made?
Say it again.
If you are in a stranger's house, it's dark, and it turns out the stranger who owns the house is Mark Merrill. How many ex-Riot bodies do you trip over in Kassad's analogy?
I don't know what the... I don't even...
is?
I know Kassad, and I have no idea what this person's talking about, genuinely, mate.
I have no idea.
I have no idea what they're referring to. What I don't get is, please give us a fucking break in the question. Like, put in the question what you mean. Like, because I have no idea what he's... I have no idea what this person's referring to.
Yeah, all right,
So,
fair enough.
I can't help you on that one, I guess.
Who would make up your Mount Rushmore of LoL coaches? Would any of them make it onto your Mount Rushmore of coaches in any esport?
Fucking hell. Like, let me go back again. So what was the start of that question? It feels like a struggle session. This. Come on, hit me with it.
Who would make up your Mount Rushmore of LoL coaches? So top 4 LoL coaches.
So like Korma. Let's see. So we've got
Tabe
Korma.
Probably at this point.
Tabe can be
Yep.
Tabe, Aaron from old EDG.
That's probably fair too.
That's a pretty good Mount Rushmore right there. There's 4 people, right?
And then the question
and would
is,
they get into my great... Like, logically, just from the resume alone, I'm pretty sure Korma probably has to be in the all-time esports. I mean, and even if you think it was Faker, at the end of the day, he still did do some sort of a Phil Jackson, like, work with the rest of the team. It wasn't just Faker. So Korma almost certainly has to be... I mean, the problem is it's not like coaching's as big in other races. So maybe like Zonic from CS gets in there. But actually, I don't think this list would be as long as people think. Coaching's still fairly underdeveloped now, right? So actually, the league ones would probably be quite high up there.
I think probably there'd probably be 2 or 3, because even back in the day, like if you look at classic esports, you know, a lot of the 1v1 esports, the coaches were not super relevant, right? It's mostly been team-based esports, and team-based esports being big is... you know, Counter-Strike's been big for a long time, but, you know, team-based esports didn't really get big until like the 2010s. You know, before that, it was mostly 1v1 esports. So I think, and also coaching wasn't as developed. So yeah, I think probably a lot of those, you know, probably a couple of those guys get on the overall. Following from the latest 4 Horsemen episode, how much do you agree with Richard's take that esports journalism is already a lost cause? It feels bad. Do you feel that there is space for new journalists who have integrity to enter the fold?
All right, by the way, let me just explain something very simply. There isn't actually gatekeeping in esports. Like, when you say, like, would you want, you could just do it now. You could, after this show, you could literally start and publish it on the internet. You've done it. There you go. Congrats. Welcome to the content scene. The problem is, you don't mean, can I publish stuff? You mean, can I be like you and be famous and have a job and go to the... Well, I can't tell you that part. Like, that part is the politics of the industry. Do they want new people? Will you be kept out because you're not big enough? The problem is, anyone can contribute and be part of the scene. It's actually one of the best things. It's why, in a way, you can't be cancelled on social media unless you're blocked by social media itself and banned. But I do think, like, the path to become a Richard Lewis might not be available. That's how I would phrase it.
Yeah, it's hard because you have to have the credibility to get to the place where Richard is. I mean, I'm sure you can do it. You would just have to try really hard independently, but you also have to have the connections, you know, or have people who are willing to trust you and talk to you, which Richard Lewis has because of his track record. It's hard to do investigative journalism from scratch, right? But
here's the one thing I would go on.
Well, all of us in terms of content creation got started in writing, like all of us did, myself included. And so I think like you absolutely can get started as a writer or a content creator these days, and you just have to hammer away at it. It's not like shit was instant for us. It took us many years to even get full-time jobs, both me and Thorin in esports. Many years. That's
the part I don't understand, Monty. Even though I would agree with the modern day person who's trying to get in the industry, that the industry is very different now. And for example, it's not just that you're saying to someone, because I suffered, you must suffer too. Because yes, the industry was very different back then. There was no choice but to suffer back then. But the part I don't get is this, Monty. When do we ever get credit for suffering? Like if some dickhead like Jacob Wolf wants to say, I can't make not even a living, a comfortable living at the level I want to be at in my mind, grind and my status, this industry is broken. It's like, wait. Jacob Wolf, literally me and Richard Lewis did do this 100 hours a week for like $10,000 a year. So my question to you, if you're Jacob Wolf, would be, why can't, even if you can't get to the level where you make the 100K, why can't you do it for 10K? Like at the end of the day, Richard, the reason me and Richard did it wasn't for the money. We did it because it was an important thing to us. Now, afterwards, we then backed into jobs. That's cool. But essentially, Monty, if I'd never been paid, like on Gamers was the first time I ever got a proper salary. I think I got like 35 or 40K a year for that, right? Before that, I used to be on 10K, 12K, 14K a year. In that era, if I'd have quit then, it still would have been a worthwhile endeavor. I still did the thing I wanted to do. I still grinded. I still was semi-professional, whatever you want to call it. Like, what I don't get is this entitlement of like, I must be given a giant job where I am like a fucking literal like sports star from the 90s. Dude, think of the payment you can get if you wrote for some of those giant upcoming sites. Like, you were on the kind of salary that like in the 80s would be like a fucking baseball pitcher was getting that. Like, I think that's a pretty cool gig in its own, because you get to do what you want to do and make a living. It's not about being rich. Well,
it's also,
I think that's like, worth acknowledging.
Jacob was working at ESPN at 19 years old when he didn't even have a college degree.
That's insane. Like, exactly. What insane. A mega gig.
Insane.
Oh, it's also clearly like a very like, I mean, I hate to use that term because people have abused it, but I mean it in the literal. It's a very privileged position to be in.
Yes.
So on a gig like that at 19, you can't make that the default expectation, or like that's what everyone should get, or even worse, don't ever tell me that word if you deserved it. That's not even how those salaries work. That's like a fucking rising tide carries all ships thing. If the industry was 20 years ago, there's no deserved. You were making 4,000 a year. If the industry's where it's at in, I don't know, 10 years, maybe you make 100K a year. Like, in that scenario, your work is your work. That's why, in my opinion, I think the most important thing literally is legacy. It's not how much money you made. Who gives a fuck about that?
During the inception and growth of LFN, what factors have been instrumental in its success and expansion? I think it's mostly just people's commitment to it. Like, I think like people, because we bootstrapped it and didn't take investment, like people willing to just grind it out while we got sponsors and got on our feet and like just doing the work week in and week out was by far. And this is how the world works, guys. And like, it goes back to the journalism question. It's like, how do you get there? You find the right, you either do it yourself or you find the right group of people who's just going to fucking grind until it works. And like, you can't quit. You just have to keep grinding. And that's it. So I think that was by far the most, what would you say?
I mean, it's why when people say naively, because they don't understand how the business works, when people ask like, hey, will X, Y, and Z be joining LFN? It's like, well, the joke is some of them might not want to. They're not going to get paid much money right now.
Don't want
and
them
they're gonna, and like Monty says, they're going to have to actually essentially have a startup mindset and grind for a few years. Like, these are going to be some years where we've all taken it. We're just not going to make much. And we're all going to have to have literally separate jobs to subsidize doing this for two reasons. Like I just said about before. One, because it's worth doing. This is quality content we want to create. It's enjoyable to create, and we think it should be in the world. And then two, we hope one day it builds into something that becomes its own financially viable path.
Yeah.
So I actually think the other cool thing for me about LFN is, like, the difference now is this: if we do get the investment one day, the fucking meek shall inherit the earth. They will actually be rewarded for their fucking loyalty and dedication and grind. So I think that would be one of the coolest, most satisfying things if we ever get it funded, mate. It's just actually know these people did put in the grind to get paid. Yeah.
Or we don't have to get it funded, which is the dream, because then we don't have to sell any of the company, and we don't have to deal with it. So I mean, it's going well, guys. Don't get us wrong, but yeah, I mean, it was. First couple years were rough. It's a lot less rough now. Have you been following the upcoming release of Age of Mythology Retold? Any thoughts on Age of Mythology as an RTS? I've never really been into the Age of Empires games, not because I dislike them, but because I never really played them. So I don't really have an opinion on this. Like, I've been playing Battle Aces recently, and like I was much more in the Blizzard RTS, and then like Company of Heroes and Rise of Nations, Rise of Legends kind of RTS world. So I was just never into like Age of Empires. I never really played it. So
I only played like the first two. The thing about Age of Empires, Monty, is it was more in the era when you played it for single player rather than the multiplayer. So the reason why Age of Empires had a charm is it almost mixed like Red Alert with like Civilization, but not as nerdy as Civilization. It was almost like a mix of the two. So like as a single player game, I remember it having charm. But sadly, you'll notice we get these questions semi frequently, Monty. There are are some people who don't know how insanely niche it is that they're still following Age of Empires esports in 2024. And sadly, not only do they not know how niche it is, but the reason why I say they don't know how niche it is because annoyingly they keep demanding we be involved in it. Just like Melee people can never stop telling me I must be involved with Smash Brothers Melee. It's like, what you mean is this. You mean you wish a guy like me was involved. It doesn't have to be me. Like, I'm pretty spread thin already. I'm already doing like all these other games. So it's just one of those weird things where people like demand you get in on their hobby. It's like, look, you can have all the time you want. You have at it with Age of Empires. I mean, everyone keeps bragging about, they do this tournament, you know, Thorin, where no one knows who the names of the players are. So you just, well, the joke is that'd be me with a normal tournament of Age of Empires, wouldn't it? But anyway, right, that's enough. That's enough.
I will probably play it though. I know about the remaster and you know it coming out. So, do you think that a sport benefits more from having a dynasty or a different champion every year? Which do you personally enjoy more?
I mean, I have a good answer for this because it's basically what I always say about what I want the Counter-Strike Tier 1 scene to be like. I actually think he's created a false dichotomy there. And here's why. Because notice the implication in how he framed it was like this, Monty. You either have a dynasty, a team that wins all the time, or you just have different teams winning, right? It's not as simple as that. I think if that's the option, everyone would probably choose the dynasty, right? Because your assumption would be the dynasty means one team was on top and was dominant and kept doing the right things and no one could stop them. So in some sense, they've probably shown you something about how the game is played or figured something out that no one else has leveled up to. Whereas the implication, actually, if you just consider it in a uniform sense, a different team wins, is maybe it's even almost like random elements, or it's just luck, or, you know, this year, this team. What you want is this. You want a blend of the two. Here's what you want, Monty. You want different teams winning, as in it's not only one team, but different teams winning because they're so all insanely good, they could all have been the dynasty. That's the dream. The dream is when you have 3 or 4 teams who, left to their own devices, like Federer or Nadal or Djokovic, would have won everything by themselves, battle each other for the title. And that's the dynamic. I think that's what you want. So, for example, the classic era, I always give the example in Counter-Strike, was in 2015. We had an era where you had 4 teams who could all be the champion. You had Virtus Pro, you had TSM from Denmark, you had Fnatic from Sweden, and you had Envious from France. And what was mega was they all had distinct playing styles. There was zero overlap because they were all national teams, and they all, in theory, could be the champion and would win events. And so it was like, actually, every major was incredibly exciting because you never knew which one's going to get the right bracket, come a good. I think the sweet spot is that one. You don't want it to be where people win, because here's the funny thing. The next year, Monty, in 2016, we actually had a period where there was 9 LANs, all won by a different team, but that was because the level was really low. So it was parity, but it was terrible parity. It was like, essentially, there was no true all-time great team. So, you know, one event would be like Na'Vi, and then Flipside, well, I put Flipside in, then fucking Cloud9, VP, NIP, and that was like, actually, believe it or not, as much as I think it becomes boring when one team wins, it also becomes boring when it's only ever a different team winning. So I think the sweet spot is you just want a lot of parity among a bunch of potential dynasties. That's my take.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you need the balance because, like, you have to have the narrative of, like, taking down the giant, right? And obviously, like, it helps to have the narrative of, like, Tom Brady and the Patriot, or Mahomes and the Chiefs, or, you know, Curry and the Golden State Warriors, right? Because it generates a lot of interest in the league, and the multiple titles make eras that mean things. And I think you'd agree, like, your classifications of eras in Counter-Strike are super interesting, and, like, it helps you talk about concept.
If everyone's saying era, I did that. Again, I didn't in concept. Obviously the historical concept existed, but no one did it in CS. I did my world rank. Yeah, there's loads of that shit. Sure.
So, like, I think that's helpful, but you also need to mix it up so we don't end up in this, like, LEC situation where it feels like inevitable and stale that G2 is, like, so good, right? Where there's not actually meaningful competition. So it does have to be broken up. And it's also, coincidentally, why in the NFL, the Patriots era felt like super bad. And, you know, why I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the way that, especially Major League Baseball works, is, like, how many times do I need to see the fucking, like, Yankees win or the Dodgers? Like, it gets pretty old. in my opinion. Yeah, it's pretty.
I'd even say as well, that's an example of how, again, this is why all things aren't created equal, Monty. There's dynasties that are amazing. Like, if you go and look at certain dynasties, they're like, obviously, if you look like the 80s 49ers dynasty, that's like one of the best offensive teams ever. Like, Jerry Rice has put them all like world record numbers. The difference is when the Patriots were a dynasty, they played like anti-football. And then what happened is the Rams are the best example. Oh, I am the team averaging 33 points a game. What is that? I now have 3 points in the, like, it's trash like that. Like that, no one wants to watch that Super Bowl. It's garbage in it. You know what I mean? You want to watch two teams like play really awesome and then the winner win, So I think there's all dynasties aren't created equal for sure.
All right, guys. That was the last question. Got through them all this week. Thank you very much for your Discord subscription.
Just resubmit the other one and make it so we understand what you mean. Reference whatever the Kazan thing when we can do it again next week if you ask us.
We don't mind if you guys resubmit the questions if we don't answer them. It's fine. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching. See you next week.